Good morning and welcome to the Alois Moxal. My name is Sebastian Schäffer and I'm the Managing Director of the Institute for the Danube Region and Central Europe. It's beautiful to be not only in this beautiful room, it's outstanding, and we would like to thank our host very much. I'll come to the words of thank you in a minute. It's also great to have the possibility to be with you in a room and have actual people sitting at the Danube Conference 2022. We are very much looking forward to have two wonderful panels with wonderful guests. And in our case, before the Danube Conference is after the Danube Conference. And last year, when the Danube Conference that we did in a hybrid setting in our seminar room at IDM, we discussed already what would be the topic of this year's Danube Conference. And of course, we thought we were going to talk about Ukraine, because Ukraine had the presidency as the first non-EU country of the EUSDR. We will be talking about Ukraine, but for very different reasons that we are all aware of. Ukraine has taken a step closer to become an EU member, but has paid a very high price for this. And within the European Union strategy for the Danube region, we believe that there is a great potential to help to at least alleviate the situation a little bit. And these are things that we are going to talk about in this Danube Conference with the title Growing Together or Drifting Apart. The Danube Conference is organized by the Institute for the Danube Region and Central Europe in cooperation with the University for Continuing Education in Krems, under the patronage of the ARGE Donauländer, the working community of the Danube Regions, with the kind support of the federal state of Lower Austria. We would especially like to thank the Federal Ministry for European and International Affairs for hosting us, as I said, in this beautiful room, but also helping us with the logistics, with the organization, and here especially Ambassador Oberreiter and Ambassador Stranzl and their whole team for their support to making this a reality. As you can probably see in the back with the Christmas tree, this is the season, and it's also flu season. And therefore, sudden changes in programs have to happen. Therefore, I would like to ask to the stage, in replacement of the Director General for Europe and Economic Affairs of the Federal Ministry for Europe and International Affairs, Ambassador Dr. Thomas Oberreiter, I'll ask Ambassador Dr. Harald Stranzl, who is the National Coordinator of the EUSDR at the Federal Ministry for European and International Affairs, and also a panelist later, to the stage to say a few words of welcome.
Thank you, Sebastian Schäffer, for your kind introductory remarks. And yes, I'm really happy to welcome you all here in the Alois Moxal in a very nice season. And as you said, I have to apologize that Ambassador Oberreiter cannot be with us today, and informed me only this morning that he is in bed. Yesterday he was still in the office, and he asked me actually to give his remarks on his behalf, on behalf of the Austrian Foreign Ministry, and I will read out the remarks he passed on to me. It's an honor to host this year's Danube Conference in the Austrian Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Alois Moxal, named after the famous foreign minister who, more than anybody else, has become in Austria a symbol of the reunification of Europe, overcoming the Iron Curtain and paving the way for Austria's EU membership. Now we are again living in a kind of Zeitenwende, with the Russian aggression against Ukraine in total contrast to 1989. The unthinkable has unfortunately become reality again, war of one European country against another European country. Also at the global level, struggles and challenges have intensified. Geopolitics has a comeback it's never seen before, and this is particularly true also for the Danube and the Black Sea areas. The European Union, born out of the ashes of World War II, is based on partnership, friendship, and trust. Cooperation, including on a macro-regional level, such as the EU strategy for the Danube region, is key. EUSDR is a platform of cooperation between EU member states and countries still outside the European Union, such as Ukraine, in times when the Danube region is in a state of flux. Our strategy also supports, with the active participation of all stakeholders, the EU enlargement process and the gradual integration of those so-called third countries into the European Union. This will also be a priority of the Austrian EUSDR presidency starting less than 1 year on November 2023. Good examples for leading institutions strongly committed to cooperation in the Danube area are thereby the Institute for the Danube Region, EDM, the Danube University Krems with its rector Faulhammer, and the province of Lower Austria, including the ARGE Donauländer, who is also present today, who are really pursuing many concrete projects, useful projects in the region, including also today's conference. I wish all of you, all of us, a fruitful and inspiring discussion.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Stranzl, and we will continue with a video message from Dr. Martin Eichtinger, State Minister of Housing, Labour and International Relations in the government of Lower Austria, on behalf of Johanna Mikl-Leitner, Governor of Lower Austria.
Rector Faulhammer, dear Fritz, Ambassador Oberreiter, dear Thomas, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to address you at this year's Danube Conference here in the Alois Mock Hall at the Austrian Federal Ministry for European and International Affairs. On behalf of our Governor, Johanna Mikl-Leitner, I'm very glad to welcome all of you. After 2 years in which the conference had to move to the digital space due to the pandemic, it is particularly satisfying that it can be held in front of an in-house audience again this year. Unfortunately, I cannot be with you on site today. This time not because of the pandemic, but because of meetings in Brussels. As every year, the Danube Conference is dedicated to the pressing issues that concern us in the Danube region. Today the topic is Growing Together or Drifting Apart, Regional Contributions to a Continental Struggle. It is essential that regions in Europe exchange ideas and interact with each other to establish, use and promote cooperation. With regard to the challenges that today's world is facing at the moment, this is more important than it has been for a long time. We are currently experiencing one of the most challenging times of our life, a time that affects all European states and all European regions with unprecedented challenges. There's no easy way to say this and no nice way to express it. There is war again in Europe. A horrific war that, apart from the enormous human suffering, is an enormous burden for Europe, especially the people at site, but also for the Danube region as a whole. Every day, we are all experiencing the terrible consequences that this war has on both our societies and our economies. They affect multiple parts of our daily lives, from the energy crisis to food security and increased migration. This is why it is now time to act and stand together as the strong Danube region that we have become over the years. The cooperation that we have built carefully and amicably shall now unify us facing the Russian war of aggression in the Ukraine. Over 30 years ago, Lower Austria and Baden-Württemberg initiated an international regional exchange along the Danube by establishing the working community of the Danube regions. At that time, it was with a focus of reconnecting a region that had been divided by the Iron Curtain. Today, the working community is an institution that still dedicates its work to creating and cultivating friendships beyond borders. This work is crucial to maintain a good basis for dialogue and contacts in the respective regions. Friendships built in times of peace are now relevant and necessary to support talks and discussions to find solutions in times of crisis. It is our belief in Lower Austria that working together across regional and state borders is a crucial tool to foster peace and prosperity for people living in Europe. I would like to thank all the participants and partners who made this conference possible. Thank you very much for your dedication. I wish you a day of rich and fruitful discussions, as well as an informative and successful conference.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, in the capacities of both organizing institutions, the Rector of the University for Continuing Education in Krems and Chairman of the IDM, Friedrich Faulhammer.
Good morning, dear Ambassador Stranzl, dear Sebastian Schäfer, dear colleagues. Yes, I'm the living synergy effect. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this year's Danube Conference. For the first time, I'm doing this field in a double role. Chairman of the IDM and Rector of the University for Continuing Education Krems. This rolled into one function also expresses the close partnership both institutions have shared for many years and which has been intensified with a cooperation agreement since this year. The main goal of this cooperation agreement between IDM and our University for Continuing Education Krems is to increase cooperation, of course, of our two institutions, but especially to implement intensive joint activities. Ladies and gentlemen, the Danube Conference is a core element of IDM's annual program. This 11th edition seeks to bring together representatives, again, from politics, academia, think tanks, and international organizations in the intention to discover the potentials regional cooperation bears in the current situation. Next year, the IDM will celebrate its 70th anniversary. Unfortunately, without our long-standing former chairman, Erhard Busek. Today's Danube Conference is the first one being held since his decease. Looking back to his very impressive career and the IDM's work for the region, the title of today's Danube Conference, Growing Together, reflects Erhard Busek's endeavors for a peaceful and integrated Danube region. From 1953 on, the IDM has focused on the investigation of conditions to foster cross-border dialogue and cooperation in the region, and as well has promoted mutual understanding. Today, allow me to express my gratitude when taking the chair of the Institute for the next 3 years. I very much look forward to work with all members of the team, with the whole community, on the mission that unites us. The pinpointed vision of IDM states that the people of Central and Southeastern Europe share a common culture, a common cultural heritage, and therefore face similar regional and global challenges. It is my personal conviction that Europe's future lies in this diverse region characterized by the river Danube and its tributaries connecting different religions, historical experiences, ethnicities, and traditions, and that it will be decided here. Let's shed light on what unites us. Cross-border cooperation is the driving force and key to reach a more democratic, peaceful, and sustainable European future. Together with our funding and cooperation partners, we will bundle our efforts to continuously work on achieving this goal. In this context, science and universities, including our University for Continuing Education Krems, also have a very specific role to play. Their task is to provide solid and reliable knowledge on relevant issues pertaining to this cooperation and generally on the important topics developing within the Danube region. In following a contemporary transdisciplinary approach of science, people's experiences need to be woven into the process of attaining knowledge. Today's conference provides the opportunity to present this part of science in the two panels on the program this morning. At this point, many thanks again to the federal state of Lower Austria for their long-standing kind support and excellent cooperation within the framework of the Danube Conference and beyond. I would also like to thank BOKU, the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences Vienna, the Europa Forum Wachau, and the IMC University of Applied Sciences Krems, all our cooperation partners. And in the ARGE Donauländer, we have found a great cooperation partner based on a relationship where both benefit from the synergies. By having established the ARGE Donauländer info point at the IDM in 2019, it is even easier to profit from these joint forces and to invest them directly into the region. Finally, I would like to express my gratitude to the Federal Ministry for European and International Affairs for hosting this conference at this wonderful location. Once, the late Alois Mock said that he believes the European Union to be the biggest factor to guarantee peace in Europe. I'm sure he would have been as devastated as we are having to experience a war that again is raging in Europe. The impact has evidently developed a serious threat for the European Union and its narrative of being a peace builder. Although the European Union and its member states were not able to prevent the war, we can and must do everything to prevent the defeat of the very fundamentals Europe is built on, the values of a democratic and open society. Hence, occasions such as the Danube Conference are crucial in terms of coming together and debating what needs to be done at the regional level. How we direct our efforts to maintain peace, tackle climate change, safeguard democracy, overcome social inequalities, reach an understanding about each other's limitations and needs is decisive for either growing together or drifting apart in Europe. For all these reasons, I'm looking forward to hopefully thought-provoking debates and to outstanding panels. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rector Vollhammer, for these introductory words. Thank you, Fritz, for also welcoming us on behalf of IDM. We are diving right into our first panel, which is called From Prisoners of Geography to Key Players of Europe's Future Macro-Regional Perspectives on the Geopolitical Dimension of the Danube Region. And therefore, I would like to welcome to the stage Nadia Afanasieva, who is the director of the Ukrainian Institute for International Politics in Kiev, Ukraine. Nadia, please. Yep. I would also like to welcome to the stage Michal Blaszko, Ambassador and National Coordinator of the EU Strategy for the Danube Region from the Ministry of Investments, Regional Development and Informatization in Slovakia. Michal, please. Welcome to the stage, the counterpart in Austria, National Coordinator of the EUSDR from the Federal Ministry for European and International Affairs, Dr. Harald Stranzl. And last but not least, Teresa Stummer from the Department for International and European Affairs of the Federal State of Lower Austria, also representing the working community of the Danube Regions, ARGE Donauländer. Thank you very much for joining us today for a discussion that certainly will revolve around the topic that has been mentioned many times already and that has shocked us all in the beginning of this year and changed the course, how everything developed in the region. We will not only go through it by coincidence alphabetically, but also from the topics that we are going to talk about in 2 rounds of questions, and then we will open up for questions from the audience. So get ready, be prepared, use the opportunity. I'm very happy that we can have this possibility again, and afterwards we'll have a final round to conclude this panel discussion. I would like to start with Nadia. Nadia, last year I mentioned at the Danube Conference we talked about the upcoming presidency, and we are looking forward to talk about especially also your engagement with your institute. You are one of the few Ukrainian institutions that are heavily working in the EUSDR from the very beginning, and it was supposed to be a celebration of that presidency. You have worked in this macro-regional strategy, as I said, for a long time. Where do you see the potential for Ukraine, but also the EU here, not only in the current situation, but also in the mid and long-term future? And what will be next after the presidency?
I probably will not tackle only the presidency, but if we are talking about the macro-regional dimension of the problem, of the policy of our lives, we can also pay attention to what is spoken in the part of the eastern side. I mean Russia, Russian Federation, and their rhetorics concerning the region and our macro region. If we are going a little bit into the history, not so far till 2021, it was a very clear official statement of Mr. if I can call him Mr. The Minister of Foreign Affairs Lavrov, who told that we are so many times trying to collect again and to ask again to cooperate all the organizations, all the countries from the Organization of Warsaw Pact, that we are finally already not so happy to that all these organizations, all these countries do not really want to cooperate. So we need to take the decision what to do with them. And if they don't want to cooperate, we need to force them to cooperate. And just to remember who are the countries of the Warsaw, of the Organization of Warsaw Pact. The majority of those countries which are in the Danube strategy, actually, not only Ukraine. And here, on the official level, we do have a really threat for all the region. And if we are talking about Ukraine and what is Ukraine now experiencing, and how the other countries are helping, the other countries need to understand very clear that they are not helping Ukraine to win. They are helping themselves to maintain the security in the region, to understand what is the cost of the European Union. I'm not sure, by the way, that probably I'm wrong. Your countries maybe passed through different kind of difficulties before joining EU. But I'm not sure if any of the EU citizens do know the price of the European values, the price of the EU membership. Ukrainians now do. And we do have now the 96% of the support of the European Union membership. This was not ever in the history of Ukraine. The same with NATO. This is only because of the price we are paying for it. And if we are talking about the cooperation and about the EU membership and different types of negotiations in between for this EU membership, I'm 100% sure that our government now, pressed by the civil society, pressed by these statistics of the normal citizens, of the common citizens, they will not let them go, and there are actually no excuses for them to go somewhere else, but not to to implement the EU agenda and EU membership. And the new presidency for us, actually, it was one of the steps towards this. I do believe that we still have a lot of plans in our work plan from the presidency because we haven't implemented them at all. We did have only 2 events which we actually planned in our program. But we are happy to have Slovenia as a presidency in 2023, who are very open to us to hold joint events as well, and also Austria for 2024. The country which already is preparing for the presidency and already is demonstrating the full openness to us to make some events together in 2024. But I really hope that 2024 for us will be the year when we can invite you to Ukraine, to the secure already state, and to hold joint events there.
Thank you, Nadia.
Thank you.
So we already have the next 2 topics of the upcoming Danube conferences for the next years. Michael, Slovakia has been helping Ukraine in many ways through these difficult times, but also against the Russian aggression. And I would like to talk especially about the context of the EUSDR, because as the previous presidency, you also helped to organize the annual forum, and it was held in Košice. Could you tell us more about the cooperation with your Ukrainian colleagues within the EUSDR and the experience of the past year?
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me for this nice conference in this beautiful place. Thanks a lot. Yes, where to start? Yeah, I think my journey in Danube strategy has begun back in 2016, and that year I met Nadia. So yes, we kind of cooperate together for quite a long time. But yes, I may go to the last year of let's say being a part of the trio of presidency of the Danube strategy. Yes, after 2021, when Slovakia held the presidency, I was more or less in the mood like, please, no more again. It's not an easy task, and since my start in the Danube strategy, that was second time of holding the presidency within the strategy. So when the war has started and this terrible aggression from Russia to Ukraine became a reality, it was a shock for us, and it was connected with, oh, come on, now probably Ukraine will not be kind of able to do the activities, the whole activities that they were planning to do during their presidency. So we are here to help. So we had to discuss with our Slovenian partners having a presidency already now, and we have started our let's say discussions and activities within the trio. More or less, we had to postpone some activities. We were kind of maybe waiting for a few months if Ukraine will be able to rejoin us and to perform their activities, let's say at least at the end of their presidency period. But I think we had some discussions within the trio, and we had some meetings within the Danube strategy. So we were kind of able to retain the activities of the presidency. The special part of it was annual forum. We had some discussions how to tackle this issue. One possible solution was not having an annual forum, but this was very soon, we went against this idea, so we decided to have an annual forum, of course. The second idea was to have it like fully online. It's much, let's say, easier than to have it on site. But after those many years of COVID situation in Europe and COVID restrictions, in 2021 we had an annual forum in hybrid format, but it was really limited due to COVID restrictions. So we decided to have it, let's say, in hybrid form, but we decided to have as much people as possible to have on site in Slovakia. So we decided or maybe it was a little bit of my idea to offer our Ukrainian friends to do the forum in Slovakia, let's say in the really beautiful city of Košice in the eastern part of Slovakia, very close to Ukrainian border, just to highlight the fact that we might be close to Ukraine and to help them with such an issue. I, let's say, asked my minister, and her answer was quite immediate. Okay, yes, we are here to help them. We had, let's say, an advantage of still having some budget left within the project finance from Danube Regional program for financing of annual for us. So we had just to decide to have, let's say, state contribution to the ERDF money to have the annual forum again in Slovakia. Yes, I think it was not an easy situation for Ukraine. I think they did a very good job. We decided that we will, let's say, tackle the logistic part of the annual forum, that we will provide the premises, technical equipment, catering, but the content will be, let's say, delivered by our partners from Ukraine. And I think this was a good idea. I think it was a good, very nice example of the cooperation within our strategy. From my, let's say, thoughts, this was our third attempt of having an annual forum in Slovakia, and this was the best one. Thanks, maybe even thanks to Ukraine and thanks to the cooperation. We had more than 200 people on site there, so I think this was quite a nice number. We had more than 1,000 views on what it was, YouTube, yeah. We had quite a good journalist coverage of the annual forum. We had more than 20 journalists from the whole European Union there. So I think this was really a good example of the cooperation that it really helps. Yes, and maybe looking forward working together in the coming period.
So at least in this horrible situation, we find a ray of light in gathering experiences and seeing solidarity and cross-border cooperation. Within the Danube Rectors Conference, we have planned to have the annual meeting in Užhgorod since 2020. Mm-hmm. So, of course, for the first time, we had to hold it completely online. Then we had a hybrid format in 2021. And then we said, okay, we will do the DRC summer school in Užhgorod in 2022, which also was not possible. But we are not giving up. We will come to Užhgorod also with the DRC, and then maybe 2024 at the latest. It's not far from Košice, actually. Yeah. Ambassador Stranzl, there has been a lot of debate in Austria about the status of neutrality within this Russian war against Ukraine. And while there's a clear positioning within the EU, we could observe that there's some sort of new non-alignment forming globally. And also within the EUSDR, we see different approaches that are being discussed. Do you see a possible shift in our region in the future?
There were actually a couple of very interesting and also provoking elements in your question, and I try, before I come to the core of the question on EUSDR, perhaps one remark on Austria's neutrality, just to avoid a misunderstanding. Since 1955, of course, Austria is pursuing a strict military neutrality, but never ever political one. I think this is very important to stress at this occasion, because Russia's unprovoked war of aggression is in full contradiction to the international law, to all norms and values of the UN Charter. So there cannot be a political neutrality, at least not for Austria. And of course, having said this, there will be no military support, no military equipment coming from Austria to Ukraine. This is just constitutionally impossible. But at the same time, we try to be helpful and show our clear solidarity towards Ukraine with humanitarian aid, and also, of course, welcoming, receiving in Austria refugees. And I think, if I'm correctly informed, per capita, we are number 4 as far as the statistics of the European Union, and the taking up of refugees is concerned. Second, also interesting element, because there is much debate about it on this so-called new non-alignment movement globally, and perhaps also its effects on our region, the Danube region. I think, as I tried to say already in the introductory remarks, geopolitics has a comeback. Geopolitics is back, reminding us a bit of big power politics of the 19th and 20th century, a bit like the paintings here in the ceiling of this room. And we have again competing blocks, systemic rivals, as they are called. Some talk about a bipolar world, West versus the rest. Some rather of a tripolar world, political West, US, European Union, versus the famous dragon bear, so this alliance between China and Russia. I'm not so sure whether we can really talk about an alliance between Beijing and Moscow, but still. And there is a kind of new non-alignment group of countries. We could even call it a new third world quota, where countries actually are pursuing floating coalitions according to their interests, and also the issue that is at stake. So this a bit on new non-alignment. I mean, we could discuss it, perhaps a separate topic for discussion, whether this new non-alignment has any resemblance to the non-alignment group of the 50s, 60s, and 70s. But nevertheless, I think it's true. There is a relatively big number of countries who does not want to join firmly and steadily join one of the two other big, so to say, poles in global politics. More specifically on the Danube area, yes, also this area is a geopolitically a contested region. This has to do with just geography. I mean, Danube is the most international river in the world. The Danube and Black Sea regions have always been a very important corridor for trade, for transport, for energy. It's been really a kind of gateway between East and West Asia and Europe, and also interesting via the regional power Turkey, also a gateway to the Near East and further on to Northern Africa. And this all led to a situation that lately, more than before, and before the war in Ukraine started, there was really big powers seeking influence in the region. China, Russia in particular, but also others. China with strategic investments in infrastructure projects. We've all read about it. The Belt and Road Initiative. The EU tries to answer with its Global Gateway Initiative. Russia with its concept of near neighborhood, focusing, of course, unfortunately enough, on Ukraine and Moldova, but more generally on the post-Soviet area. And then you have in the Danube region, of course, countries, and Serbia comes at least to my mind, countries who are oscillating between the different geopolitical players in the region. And what is the answer of European Union on all that? Yes, as always, I should say a bit self-critically, and as a committed European, I dare to criticize also constructively the European Union. Here again, a bit the kind of economic and trade giant, but a political dwarf with a question mark also in the area. I think the European Union has to think more geopolitically, more strategically. It's become to do so, but it's only happening gradually, and this also in the Danube and Black Sea area, because it's strategically important that this area is part of Europe, is linked to Europe. It has to do with our security and stability. European Union is by far the biggest donor and investor, which is sometimes forgotten. So I think these economic ties, this investment policies has to be followed by really strategic thinking about this region, this area, which, and it sounds a bit really strong words from my side, but I would say that the future of the European Union, to a certain extent, will be decided also in the Danube region. This has to do with a shifting of let's say, of the center of the European Union, unfortunately again, after Brexit, from the west towards the center of Europe and towards the east. So this is a bit of a new geopolitical system also within European Union, and we have to take it into account and to reckon with it. And that's exactly the reason, and I try to come to an end. That's the reason why also EU enlargement, as discussed as it may be, and also in a way put into question as it may be, it has to be also a geopolitical, and it is also a geopolitical instrument, and the Western Balkans integration, and also the candidate status for Ukraine and also for Moldova, it's also, and has to be understood as a clear signal and a political statement towards those countries. Falling short, of course, now of membership and all the benefits that membership entail, but nevertheless, I think also the statement as such is important enough. And concluding on EUSDR, and I think we're coming to this in more detail. Also, this is a platform, of course, we all know, for regional cooperation, but it's also a platform for gradual integration to give our Ukrainian and Moldovan friends this clear perspective. You are gradually becoming you are part of Europe, but gradually on your path towards Europe. And it's important, I think, for both sides that this region stays oriented towards Europe, belongs to Europe, has a clear perspective. And it's cynically a bit that we needed this war in Ukraine to understand a bit that this region is, of course, in the middle of geopolitics, and there is also a new momentum for the Danube strategy. Mm-hmm. So this would be a bit my thoughts on your question.
Thank you very much for answering these multitude of questions that were hidden in this one tiny question that I gave you. Teresa, if we continue here with the geopolitical aspect that has been mentioned a couple of times now, and also the effects on the region, which role can actors like the working community, the ARGE Donauländer, play, and how can they contribute to alleviate the situation also with regards to Ukraine?
First of all, thank you for having me today. It's a first for me because usually I work more behind the scenes in preparing for these events. My boss, the head of the working community of the Danube Regions and the General Secretary, Dr. Ortner, today is also at meetings in Brussels. So I'm quite glad to be here today and be able to talk to you about this topic. As we heard before by Landesrat Eichtinger, the idea behind the working community was to connect the region after this long divide due to the Iron Curtain. And so our goal was to build up friendships beyond borders and reconnecting this torn region. The Danube as a unifying river that runs through all of us is the link that we in Lower Austria chose to further this cooperation. So in all of our work, the idea was always safeguarding the peace in this region and building up a network of where we can be able to discuss different topics. In this, we established the ARGE Donauländer 30 years ago and worked on different topics throughout the time. One which was always very important to us is the field of culture, because it's it's a very good point to take into account for building friendships. It's usually not as too politically difficult. You can always find some common ground, but you can also reflect with the means of culture the current difficulties. For example, at the moment, right now, we have this exhibition we established, which is called Climate and Me, which will tour through all the Danube countries in our region, in the working community. This is also thank you to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because we will have it in the different Austrian cultural centers in the embassies. And for example, our region is quite big since we established it 30 years ago, and there was this big wish of all the regions to be part of the working community. So we have also some members in Ukraine. The Oblast Odessa is part of the working community, and the Republic of Moldova is also part of the working community. So we have this history of working with our partners that are now affected so drastically by the situation, and we try to keep this cooperation going with our work in Lower Austria. And one of the big benefits I see with working on the regional level is that sometimes it's a bit easier. It's a bit, since the level is a bit lower, you can maybe act faster on the as well as on the administrative level. You have your contacts, and you can be a bit more flexible with maybe some smaller projects that then can fill out the big strategies that we have in the region. A good example for that is the Danube Salon that we established 2 years ago in the framework of the Europaforum Wachau. So every year at the Europaforum Wachau, our big Lower Austrian conference on international cooperation, which is held in Göttweg, we have one evening event, the Danube Salon, that is always tackling some urgent topic in the Danube region. And this year we were talking about safeguarding peace in Europe. As I mentioned before, one of our founding ideas. And there we had Irina Izarova from the University of Kiev, who now works at the University in Krems, and then as well Ivanka Popovic from the University of Belgrade, and Claudia Crawford from the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, who were discussing what the regions can do to ensure peace in Europe. And it was a very, very interesting point of view from these different actors to see, with all their different perspectives, what are the challenges, and that. But on the bottom line, it was always we need to keep talking. It's all the channels that we built up over the last 30 years need to still be open, and we can't draw ourselves back in when times are difficult. We had this a bit already during the pandemic, which made it quite difficult to cooperate. But especially now in this situation, it's just very important to keep talking, and maybe nowadays even talk a bit more about the things we might not like as much and about our differences to maybe see where we still can find common ground and focus on this. So yeah, I think especially with this conference today and the conference we have usually in spring, we have found now a very, very good way for us in the working community in cooperation with you, the EDM, to have these two events where we can always talk about very pressing and current issues. So this is one of the very, very big benefits I see in our work on the regional level.
Thank you so much. If you haven't seen the Danube Salon because you couldn't be in Krems, it's available on the YouTube channel of IDM Vienna. We will also upload a recording of this conference there later on. It's one of the first events since the corona pandemic where we are not live streaming, but it will be available afterwards. We will afterwards also have a little bit of culture that you mentioned, but let's go to the now already also often mentioned candidate status for Ukraine. And Nadia, you with your institute, you have been involved in answering the questionnaire that was sent by Brussels. I still remember the iconic photo where the President Zelensky signed the application for membership, and then in record time you helped to answer the questionnaire and sent it back to the European Commission. The candidate status is well deserved, but the actual work now begins. And what are the next steps, and where do you see the biggest challenges, apart from the fact, of course, that there is currently still these heinous attacks on civilian infrastructure and critical infrastructure coming from the Kremlin regime?
I can say that the question for us, it was a kind of the task, the exercise of re-evaluating what have been done and what need to be done. And we understood actually that the work is not starting now. It was started together with the association agreement signing earlier. And we do have rather good results of the association agreement already implementing. If we are talking about the questionnaire and preparing ourselves to the negotiation period, we definitely we do not have challenges a part of the war. We need to work. Now the government is working, like I can say, on Saturday and sometimes Sunday. Not everybody is happy of this, but still. And we understand perfectly that this is a kind of the way for us, but there is no way back. So it depends on the civil society now. And by the way, the questionnaire filling in, it was a good exercise for us of the government and civil society and expert cooperation as well. Because the government, when they saw the Office of the EU integration and Euro-Atlantic integration, when they saw the questionnaire, they understood that they cannot afford only by government all this material. They asked the support of the experts, and the working groups were formed, joint working groups were formed to fill in this questionnaire. So yes, it was a real effective job and real good exercise for us, and we do believe that we still during the implementation of these tasks, we will remain in the same boat, like together. I do not really see the signs that we will change the boats, because otherwise it could be the risk for our security as well. Here we need to be very clear for ourselves, and also this is a question for me if. Like the EU membership is not only about Ukraine, it's about the European Union as well. And is the European Union able is well prepared to have Ukraine as a EU member state? This is a question. I do not have yet the answer on it, but still what we can see due to the war, the European Union at least start to work faster, the European structures start to work faster, start to work more active. They at least understood that the time passed, a lot of time, like 8 years passed, since they need to have the same decision as they do now, from 2014, when the war actually was started in Ukraine. Now we had the full invasion, and finally, already everybody understood in the region that we need to act together, and drifting apart, this is not the answer. And the situation is, if we will drift apart, we will not exist. The first will be Ukraine, who will disappear from the geography. The next will be other countries, Slovakia, Poland, and others. And we perfectly understand that the enemy will not stop. And they are showing this on the official level. I'm a little bit masochistic on my side, because I'm watching Russian news channels, all Russian propaganda channels. And they are saying now, not only now, like in 2021 already, when there were some rumors that we will have the full invasion in Ukraine, I think starting from summer, they already start to have a very clear messages to all Europe, not only to Ukraine. And we need to point this because those propaganda, which is discussing all this stuff, they are very serious. They are actually the voice of Kremlin. And even if Ukrainians, somewhere in the bottom of their heart, of their mind, they were not prepared for these invasions, they actually, at the same time, they were prepared psychologically because they understand. This is not for the first time in our history, actually. There were different types of invasion of Ukraine, and the territory is very, how to put it, very sweet, I can say. Like the territory of Ukraine having different kind of resources, the big territory, and yes, I can understand why it's very attractive to the invaders as well. So, talking about challenges, we do not have them except the war. We just need to work on this.
Thank you. Michael, we have heard also in the introductory words the Zeitenwende, which has been this coining term from the German Chancellor calling for that this is this watershed moment that changes the times, which would be the literal translation, and it's been maybe even overused a little bit during this year. And with all the changes going on in various policies that we have seen, do you think that there is also a need to adapt within the EUSDR? Do we need new or different or adapted priority areas?
Yeah. Yes, good question, but let's say generally speaking, when the strategy was born back in 2011, it was, let's say, born together with the action plan. And in the action plan, there were some priorities or activities of the Danube strategy that should be, let's say, implemented or taken into account. Of course, this was not a document written in the stone. It was, or it is, still a living document. We had some a few years. We had some let's say tasks or let's say attempts to adapt this action plan on the situation, the current situation. We had back in 2016, we have started with it, and then during the Croatian presidency in 2020, there was quite a big change, let's say, or adapting of this action plan. And we, let's say, agreed together on, let's say, a short list of priorities and activities that should be followed by the strategy. Now we had, let's say, like up to 30 activities or priorities that we have to follow. But of course, in this situation, that of war in Ukraine and this really, let's say, shocking situation that had become this year, of course, we need to, let's say, do more. There is still a place to do more, even within the strategy. I'm not saying that the Danube strategy, or I do not think the Danube strategy is let's say, the best platform when talking about, let's say, a big or huge, let's say, change in our mindsets. The strategy was established in, let's say, peaceful times, and it's aimed at peaceful cooperation. So I do not really think that, let's say, military-based cooperation or something like this is the case within the strategy. We really hope that sooner or later the war will be over and that we will, let's say, get back on the good track again, that we will cooperate together on necessary issues that we have together, the whole region. Of course, we need to adapt to the new situation, and I think that the war in Ukraine might be the possibility to start to deepen the cooperation with still non-EU countries, not only, let's say, mentally or in mindset, but even physically. Let's rebuild Ukraine and its connection to the European Union, even physically and let's say in our minds. I think that the case in Ukraine, what you mentioned, that now you have like 94, 96% of people willing to join the European Union or that are pro-European Union. That's really good. And I think this threat from Russia, even what you mentioned, then maybe after Ukraine it might be Slovakia as a neighboring country. This will even help us, even maybe in Slovakia or in this part of Europe, to become more interested in affairs within the European Union. So really to deepen up our strong commitment towards the European Union. So more or less, yes, this is a very good year, or maybe a point to deepen up the cooperation and to keep our minds really focused on joint European challenges and European affairs, of course. So it's good.
So rather
starting
focusing.
point.
Yeah, thank you. Rather focusing on the existing possibilities that we need here, navigability of the Danube region. No,
For
PA
example,
12 for external security. No?
Yes, there are many issues that we have to work on. This is one of the possible examples. But I think what is really necessary is to try to build. I think there are two very important issues that we have to keep in our minds and to tackle. We need to work together on the ecosystem of innovations. This is something what is really important in this European area. And of course, I think environment is a very important issue as well, affecting all of us. So at least these two topics.
Thank you. Ambassador Stranzl, a little bit of change of governance within the EUSDR is going to happen next year. We already mentioned the presidency of the EUSDR that Austria is going to take over again next year. And can you tell us what changes are made in the overall structure of the governance and what are the reasons for these adaptations?
Michael mentioned already the fact that during the Croatian presidency there were adaptations made to the overall governance system of EUSDR. And I really come to the core of these changes. I mean, one of the main features of EUSDR is rotating presidency system on a yearly basis, changing presidency countries, Slovakia followed by Ukraine, now it's Slovenia in the chair, and after Slovenia following Austria. And in 2020 it was decided that the order of countries taking over the presidency, this would go according to the alphabet, starting with Austria in November, as before in November 2023 in our case, and then to be followed according to the alphabet by Bosnia and Bulgaria and so on. And that the presidency year will be synchronized with the calendar year, because so far, as we've heard, we had an autumn until autumn presidency year and stand, and with Austria's start, it will be synchronized, of course, with the calendar year. But there was to fill a gap of 2 months between Slovenia is so to say finishing its presidency, and Austria theoretically has to start in January, and so in our case it will be actually 2 more months to go. So we have to have good energy, actually more than a year to do our presidency, which is also, I think, a chance and an opportunity. And I think this was already mentioned, but I think it's very, very important to stress again. It's important that this rotating presidency system is taking place on an equal footing, that EU member states and non-EU member states can do this job, and Ukraine, as we have heard already, has done this job under very difficult circumstances, I think in a very dedicated manner. And the next, hopefully the next country after Austria would be then Bosnia as a non-EU member country to take over the presidency. I think also the trio presidency was already mentioned. I think this is also important in terms of continuity, to safeguard a certain continuity and close coordination on priorities and the program. And there will be actually later this week a meeting in Slovenia, an opening meeting for the Slovenian EUSDR presidency, and also a chance and opportunity between the trio members, which is again Ukraine, Slovenia, and Austria, actually to coordinate and talk about presidency priorities. And then another very important element of continuity is, of course, also the EUSDR Secretariat. I should call it the so-called Danube Strategy Point. Seated in Vienna, and we're happy about this. There is an antenna in Bucharest, as you probably know, and this reflects very nicely the coincidence that Austria and Romania were the so-called founding fathers of EUSDR some 10 or 12 years ago, and we're also happy, since we have him in the room, Robert Lichtner, to have him here as a very committed leader, so to say, and responsible for the Danube strategy point, which will be also very useful in the sense of we have close coordination also to do with the Danube strategy point, and that's the reason why we're happy having him here at the DSB in Vienna. And I should also mention perhaps that the DSB, because of the quality of the work, has become a bit of a role model for also other macro-regional strategies, Alpine, Baltic Sea regions, where these macro-regions also discuss if they haven't done so before, to copy a bit this model of EUSDR and this secretariat unit. I think I'll stop here.
Thank you. Yeah. So with the good partners, you can and the energy that you mentioned, you will be able to fill the so to say gap.
Hopefully.
Yeah, we think that we will be happy to support that also from the side of the ARGE Donauländer, I guess. But before we open up for questions, get your questions in the room already ready. One last question from my side. Also, when we talk, as you mentioned, that maybe within the ARGE Donauländer there is the possibility to meet on a lower level and not only in the high political level. And with your experience and background in administration, what makes regional cooperation actually so difficult? What are challenges? Can you elaborate maybe also with regards to the different actors in the ARGE Donauländer and the broader picture in our region?
Yes, thank you for the question. The ARGE Donauländer, when it was founded, it was an initiative by Lower Austria and Baden-Württemberg, which are two states and regions that are quite strong. They have a lot of competence. They can decide a lot on their own, so due to their constitutional rights. But with all our members within the ARGE Donauländer, it is very difficult, the level of how much they can actually do on their own. For example, at the moment, the ARGE Donauländer always has a rotating presidency and the General Secretariat in Lower Austria. At the moment, the autonomous region of the Vojvodina, the autonomous province of Vojvodina, has the presidency. And the word autonomous already gives you the hint that in this case, there's quite a lot we can actually do in our own competence. Next year, the presidency will go to the Comitat of Győr-Moson-Sopron in Hungary. Hungary is a central state, and the Komitat themselves, they don't have that much competence within their power. So we have to then adapt a bit and find other means where we can talk. The working community itself, we had usually 3 working fields. The one is culture, as I mentioned before. The other one is transport and economy, and then we have one with regards to soil health and especially climate. This is quite restrictive with these 3 working groups. So we, a few years ago, we adopted our statutes within the working community to open it up and to actually react to this situation that all the different regions have different competence fields, so we can adapt on this and be more open and do whatever the current presidency kind of sees as their priority. So we always have these meetings with the General Secretariat and the presidency to find out what their needs are and what they want to do and convey within the region, within the cooperation of the working community. So this makes us a bit more flexible with the projects that we can tackle. And another thing which makes it a bit difficult is the change on the civil servant level, that sometimes you can't Google that. You can't Google who's now in charge of international affairs in this Komitat, in this oblast, in this region. So therefore, again, a big thanks to the Foreign Ministry, because the embassies are always a very, very good partner of ours, so we can contact them and get our contacts always on the latest level. So yeah, it's a ever-evolving job that needs to be taken care of constantly. You have to just be behind it. But when you have your partners and when you find your projects, it's very fulfilling and it's a great work, as we've seen the last few years, especially with the province of Vojvodina, that was very, very rich in our cooperation.
So maybe a good lesson learned also for the EUSDR and the working together on that level, when we think about that. Actually, funnily enough, it's only in the delta and also in the source where we have just regions participating, and the rest, it's the whole countries in the EUSDR that are participating, and maybe have a different approach.
I think that's a good point when you have the EUSDR, where the member states are actually the players, but the people who are affected, it's a regional strategy. So I think here in Lower Austria, we found very good cooperation with our constant contact with the DSP. We are quite lucky again that it is in Vienna, so we don't have a very long way for establishing the cooperation or staying in contact. But yeah.
Thank you. Well, having gone from geopolitics to actual local and regional governance, I think we've tackled a lot of different topics, which maybe opens up the possibility to ask a variety of questions. And I know we are no longer that used to it, but please raise your hand if you have a question. Georg Kauenberg is breaking the ice, but nevertheless, I know you, but please introduce yourself briefly to the panelists and ask your question.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. Georg Kauenberg from Institute of the Danube Region, Central Europe and other activities. Actually, I have a question concerning EUSDR. In how far could it be also helpful for very concrete projects? I know the money comes from EU special funds or structural funds, etc., for the border crossings from Ukraine to its western countries, in Przemysl, Poland, or Chop, and to the Slovak area, Košice, or all the crossings in Romania, very important, grain exports. So what could be done in this respect concerning rail, roads, and services, customs, etc. We have a big backlog. It's very important to alleviate it. And talking about grain, there would be connections to the Danube, and there are sections of the rail now towards the Danube where you can only move some 10 to 30 kilometers per hour. So it needs improvements. What could the EUSDR do in that respect? Thank you.
Who wants to tackle? I mean, I see two elements in it: the cross-border cooperation and the possibility of using it as a transport way.
If I can start, probably.
Yes.
If we are talking about the cross points, we have for these at least 3 cross-border cooperation programs with Ukraine, with Poland, with the Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Ukraine, and Ukraine, Romania. So in these projects, we do have already the projects which are connected with the cross-border points, with the infrastructure which is needed for this from side of Ukraine and from side of the other countries. If we are talking about the navigation, this is a very interesting point and very interesting question, which is discussed in Ukraine, at least in Ukraine, since before the war. We were discussing, we have a very good cooperation within the working group of the Priority Area 1A, navigation, and Priority Area 11, security. This is a special joint working group in between 2 priority areas, which is dealing with the administration processes. And one of our tasks in 2020, and actually we reached this goal, was to install the DAVID forms, the forms of the registration and control of on the border for the ships. So this means that if we have unified registration forms in all countries through which you can just move on the Danube, this means easier connection for products, for people, for everything. Still, there is a lot of work to be done. This is just only one example for you. But in terms of the war, we see here also the need of cooperation in terms of TNT, and also cooperation with the European strategy for the Baltic Sea, because we do have this north-east axis, which now is the strategic thing for our security, for the security in the region. And here is not only the case of the Danube strategy, this is the case of the Baltic Sea and Poland as well. At least for Ukraine, this is very important to be connected with these countries as well, inclusive for grain, inclusive for other goods, inclusive for people as well, and for the military support as well.
Additional points?
Oh, yes. Perhaps just a very short remark. I mean, I think it's of general knowledge that transport and mobility is one of the priority areas of the strategy, but perhaps at the same time a big misunderstanding that so far in EUSDR and in all these priority areas we are talking about medium long-term perspective cooperation. So the problem is really to help Ukraine, to help Moldova really with short-term projects. At the same time, we do know that this Baltic Sea grain initiative has, with the EU solidarity lanes, has become a really a success story at a very critical moment for Ukraine, and with a different hat, so to say, as staff of the Austrian Foreign Ministry, I was also trying to help and to invest also, for example, in this initiative as far as Austria is concerned. So this was remark perhaps number one. Number two is, yes, I think we have to be quicker. We have to really ask ourselves, what can we do as a regional platform to help for immediate issues and questions like the one mentioned. There will be definitely, I think, more focus on transport. also on port administrations. I think also this is I think an important element since we know that with these solidarity lanes and with the Danube having become a kind of means of transport when the Russians blocked the Black Sea ports. I think we have to come to very concrete solutions to very specific questions. And as we are talking, we are trying, and we of course in our case in contact with the Ministry of Transport, trying to see where we can help. And I think this problem will not fade away, will not go away. And at least if let's say these proposals are accepted in the national coordination and in the preparatory process of the Austrian process, I think of the Austrian presidency, I think we would definitely also put an emphasis and a focus on this issue. And last not least, I mean, there is, which is also, I think, sometimes forgotten, there is a ministerial level meeting of the transport ministers, which is also to do with the questions raised by Mr. Krauchenberg in the format of the Danube Region biannually. So last one is taking place this year, in 2 years' time. So there is a momentum, there is, I think, a clear focus also on these very, very relevant issues where we have to come up with solutions as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Michael, do you want to?
Maybe just to add, it was not mentioned when talking about, let's say, money or some projects that might be financed within the Danube strategy or within the Danube region. We need to mention, of course, the Danube transnational program or Danube region program that is implementing in this area. And of course, what is even quite necessary from my point of view to mention is is the nice word embedding of our strategy into, let's say, mainstream programs. So even in our case in Slovakia, let's say it's my ministry who is responsible for implementing of these mainstream funds implemented in Slovakia, and we are more or less open to finance, and I think the door is open within our, we have only one operational program in Slovakia. It is called Program Slovakia. What a surprise. Yes, we have quite a tough discussions with our colleagues dealing with the program. And if we, let's say, find a good projects, we can really speak about possible financing of let's say, transnational or maybe transnational programs even from let's say these mainstream funds from European Union. So the strategy is based on 3 no's. This is something we all know. We have no money, but it doesn't mean that we cannot do anything. So we are here to find a solution, to find even the money for good projects. But we need to find the good projects within the strategy. Yeah. That's the first point.
I don't want to leave you out, but
I'm not sure if I can contribute to the question, so I'm not.
Thank you. But Teresa mentioned that we should also talk about difficult questions, so feel free to ask difficult questions. Fritz.
Maybe a difficult question from the perspective of a rector of a university. You mentioned, Michael, the 3 no's within the implementation of the European strategy on the Danube region. But what is allowed is to cooperate with universities, with the higher education system. So my question would be to Nadia, Michael and Teresa, what is your experience on that? Are in your scope universities working with you, and if not, why?
Teresa, do you want?
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah, I can take that. We actually have quite good experience with working with universities. For example, within the Europaforum Wachau, your university, the University of Krems, is a big partner which helps us to document all our findings from our different events and our exchange with civil society. And also for finding projects, we have good partners within the science community. At the moment, the POCU is having a new Horizon mission project with the mission concerning water, the Danube River, where Professor Habersack contacted the working community, and we are now partners within this project and give our network so the findings and the projects can be further disseminated in the region. So I think that the science community for our work is very, very good as an impulse giver, and so we have quite good experiences with working with universities.
Thank you. How's it in Ukraine?
We had an experience since 2017. We installed a very good cooperation with the Priority Area 7, with the Slovak Ministry of Education and Serbia. Particularly in 2017, we had the event in the University of Chernivtsi, which was connected with the management of the universities and communication between universities. We had there the University of Osnabrück, also Priority Area 7 as well. So what I wanted to say that actually it was started, and for now what we can see where could be the further cooperation are the smart specialization strategies which Ukraine are now developing. And we have here a very clear parallels in between Priority Area 7, 8 and 9. Like competitiveness with the SMEs, Priority Area 8 and Priority Area 9, people and skills with the professional education and training. So in my opinion, there is a wide area of cooperation, and Ukrainian universities are very ready to cooperate. This is up to us to develop the further cooperation.
And if I may pat IDM and myself a little bit on the back, because the cooperation between the University of Chernivtsi and the University of Osnabrück was established through a project that we did from the IDM side there. And actually we met the first time in Chernivtsi,
yes,
back then. Yeah. So Michal, in Slovakia.
Thank you for the question. It's very tricky. Yeah, I think Nadia mentioned it, but on the level of our priority areas, and yes, we work on priority area 7, and it's about the more or less knowledge society. So there is kind of a necessary partner is from university. So on this level, I think it works. But I have to admit that on, let's say, national level, I mean, as a coordinator of the Danube strategy within the Slovakia, yes, that's there is a place to do it better, and maybe we can talk. And now we have an initiative called Danube Youth Network, called Danube Youth Council, and maybe within this platform we can do, let's say, much more even in Slovakia when talking about possible cooperation with universities, for sure. Thanks.
Thank you.
And if I can add.
Yes. Okay. A follow up to this?
To add one thing, because as I am also representing a little bit the Danube Rectors Conference, which is the network of more than 60 universities along the River Danube, I think this network can also be a broker for cooperating and for supporting all the member countries of the Danube strategy to improve the participation of universities in the field of implementation of the goals of the strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've heard a lot about the Danube strategy point. Robert wants to ask a question as well.
Thank you very much, and also thank you for the very, very kind words. It's always a pleasure, and we are very happy working with all the stakeholders. And I would use the opportunity to having all of you now at a podium, and having a country who already had 3 times presidency, Ukraine just finishing the presidency, in Austria just incoming in a year's time. You know, the concept of macro-regional strategies is something that is developing, and it's evolving through the time. And with all your experience, and maybe also this would be something for the next presidency to look at, what would be your recommendations, your learnings from your past years, presiding over 14 countries, especially when we talk about what you said before, the bit of the difficulty of having a strategy reacting to short-term development. So how can you make, from your point of view, the strategy more viable, more quicker in their answers, especially when we look at the developments in the war in Ukraine and also other topics that we all deal with at the moment. Thank you.
Shall we start with the furthest away presidency, going through the just finished one and then look into the future?
Yeah, okay, thank you.
As always.
Yes. Okay, from my point of view, what I see as really crucial affair or thing within the strategy. Yes, we need to become, let's say, more visible, and I think that visibility via project implementation. So I think what is necessary to do is to try to identify the let's say key projects within our region, and to it's not easy within the presidency to cover all the issues covered by the strategy. That's really almost not possible. I think even for the countries that might be much stronger than Slovakia is on capacity. Talking about capacity and money as well and anything. But I think the good point is really to focus on some specific areas, maybe some cross-sectoral issues, and to work on them. So maybe kind of let's say to limit the number of the priorities of our strategy within some, let's say, presidency period. That's a good point maybe to start. Starting point. Yeah. It might be.
Thank you.
I will support probably Michal. I also wanted to say about the cross-sectoral, because what I've noticed, and this is not only in the year of presidency, but in general, we do not really understand what is going on in other priority areas. We are meeting twice probably in a year. We are having tour de table, which is sometimes not easy to listen, but we do not really understand what is going on and how to make these parallels between some ecological issues and knowledge society. There could be very clear parallels in between this if we are talking about innovations. But we are talking about innovations, we are talking about a new period in our region, which is connected with a very high level of development and the high level of civilization, because the war is between the civilization. If we win the war, we are rather high civilization than those from the other part, from the other border. And this is connected with the priority areas and communication in between them. The other point is, I think our experience in the presidency was a unique one, because, well, it was due to the war, but still we have the excellent cooperation in between countries to organize the events. I mean, here we have the Slovakia who offered Košice as a part of the as a location to hold the forum. We had Ukraine as a presidency. We had Slovenia who also in trio was very active and also supported us. We had DSP, which was supporting us permanently in communication, and without DSP it was not really, I cannot imagine how we would manage. So this is the example of cooperation and the examples how we learned from one of another. If we can organize some kind of experiences in the strategy, something like this, in organizing joint events, not by one of the countries, but joint events in between the countries, probably it could work to understand each other better. if we are talking about the strategy as a cooperation and communication in between our countries.
Yeah. Then we have a possible activity already, but yeah, if we take the experience from the past presidency, but also looking into the future, what would you say, Ambassador?
Unfortunately, when it comes to the past presidency, Austria's presidency, of course, I was not yet in my current function as one of the two national coordinators, but trying to answer in a general way, I think Robert Lichtner's question is a core question, I think, and it really brings us to the dilemma of the EUSDR and also of all strategies, by the way, because a strategy per definition is something actually with tries to answer medium long-term questions and tries to address solutions to those questions. So I think this is this dilemma we face, but at the same time with this. Again, with this war in Ukraine, of course, we have to learn also inside the EUSDR to think what can we do and can we really tackle short-term issues, short-term problems. Very often, so far at least, we've come to the conclusion, sorry, we can't, we try, but we don't have perhaps the means, we don't have actually also the decision-taking system, to be very frank, actually, and this because of the fact that fortunately enough, until spring 2022, since the very existence of the strategy, there was no war in Europe and in the Danube region, so we didn't have actually to think about it. But I think it will be really necessary for all the presidencies. I mean, Slovenia will decide itself, but I think also in our preparations, what can we do to adapt the strategy? And the strategy is just actually kind of umbrella of the things we are doing more generally. That's at least my definition of EUSDR. What we have to do to address really short-term issues? Will not be an easy one. We can't expect miracles, to be very frank. But at the same time, I think we have to ask this question because an answer of EUSDR on this question, what can we do now concretely to help Ukraine once the seaports are blocked and so on, or border crossings issues? I think these solutions will then decide on the relevance of the strategy, actually. This will really be decisive on the relevance of the strategy in the future, and this gives me motivation enough, actually, to try, of course, together with all the other stakeholders, to think about what can we do to address short-term issues.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We have the possibility for one last short question. Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Viktor Rossi. I am the EUSDR National Coordinator of Hungary. So it's nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And I have a question to Nadia. We are also working together since 2016. So you were talking about the practical implementation of the EUSDR earlier. And we are here in the period when the new programs are starting. The DTP has already the first call. There was the Huskrova quadrilateral program with Ukraine was already adopted. The first monitoring committee was expected in December, but it will be held in January, as I heard. So when we are talking about the practical implementation, how you see the situation of the Ukrainian institutes and citizen organizations and so on, how they will be able to absorb the EU funds in this coming period, and what kind of tools or support structure the Ukrainian government has at the moment to support their activity, or what can the EU do, or what you need from the EU to support. I think for the co-financing, human capacities, or martial law situation and so on. So how it will be possible in the coming years. We have the first calls already in the door. So how it will be possible, because I think it's crucial for the implementation of the strategy. Thank you.
Victor, thank you for the questions. This is actually a very important thing, and we experienced this preparing the calls, preparing the partners for the first call of DRP. The question of co-financing is very crucial for the partners now. In DRP, we have 20% of co-financing. And usually, if we are talking about this, Well, there are some regions, for example, we do have experience with several regions who are able to put in their regional budget for the future this money. Usually we are talking about 24, 25, so like the year 24, 25, not now. But at the same time, if we are talking about universities, for example, if we are talking about civil society organizations which are from the regional level, this is a rather heavy task for them to find this 20%. For public institutions like universities, this is also connected with the procedures in Ukraine. So we have work to be done for this. It's in process. It's a long process, but still, I hope that it will be resolved. But the main point is from where they can have this 20% of the budget. In the other issues, if we are talking about the war and open aggression, Ukraine is a big territory. So if we are talking about Uzhhorod, for example, or Chernivtsi region or Lviv region, yes, there is a threat of air attacks as the whole territory of Ukraine. But at the same time, people there, partners there, understand very good that they need to act now and not to wait till the victory. They need to act now. They need to develop the same as businesses in Ukraine now. We do not have electricity, but we have generators, and businesses are working with generators. So this is the point of Ukrainian society now, and I'm talking about universities, businesses, civil society organization, government as well. We do not have time to wait. We would like to act now, and the partners from Ukraine are really searching the partners from the EU countries. But yes, this thing with the in DRP there is also the thing of reimbursement. This is even harder for the majority of partners than co-financing, and we were several times addressing to DRP this question if we can change somehow for Moldovan and Ukrainian partners this procedure, at least for some years till the situation will be more stable for those organizations. This is probably that.
Thank you very much. So we're approaching the last round of questions for this first panel. And of course, I mean, there's an obvious question that I will ask our host last. So I'm going to switch up the order a little bit. And as we've been talking about challenges and for the region, but also the overall topic of our Danube conference, are we drifting apart or are we growing together? I would like to ask Michael first in this last round. Minilateralisms within the European Union have become more and more important. Visegrad is Visegrad 4 is one of the prominent ones, which has reinvented itself over and over and taken over different capacities and different functions over the past more than 3 decades. Would you say that if we look at our macro-regional strategy, is there a further cooperation between East and West, or will it gradually become obsolete in the sense that macro-regional cooperation will replace certain minilateralisms?
Thanks a lot. Yes, this might be an issue in coming years. Let's say I personally see a possibility of working not the whole region together on some issue. I think that's quite obvious that maybe we can have some, let's say, more or less let's say inner regional cooperation within our Danube region. That's always, I think, possible. And I was talking about this embedding, and this is something that, from my point of view, it's quite obvious that we can maybe have some projects that not the whole territory will be included. But when talking about Visegrad Fund, I'm pretty sure that it will survive, more or less. Of course, such as Europe and European Union, there are many countries and in diverse situation, diverse history, social and economical development, but this is the case even within the Visegrad Fund, of course, but Visegrad countries, but I think that I have to admit that within my experience in Danube strategy, we haven't quite a big, let's say, issues together with Visegrad countries, with V4. I think this is something that we need to try to do more with the cooperation with V4 countries within the strategy. This might be quite important even for Visegrad countries, maybe to work more closer together within the Danube region as a kind of possibilities what to do together. There are, of course, topics, initiatives or priorities that are joined together within the strategy and within V4 countries. So I think there is still a possibility to do more. I don't think that it will become obsolete. What is quite important to mention here is that Visegrad countries have a fund called Visegrad Fund, and maybe we may try to find even some projects, and we might maybe start them by helping with the money from this Visegrad Fund as well. So there is always quite of needed or welcome the cooperation within V4 countries plus some countries, and more or less these countries are from Danube region. So I think this might be a good possibility and good platform to work together.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe Czech Republic will be the first one in alphabetical order. It's not that far ahead. So.
Yeah. And the fund is located in Bratislava. Huh?
Yeah, the fund is located in Bratislava.
Thank you very much. When we talk about growing together or drifting apart, it's always, of course, also looking across our borders and to our neighbors. We've touched upon a couple of them, of Ukraine in this panel, but we have not really spoken about another Danube region country that is often forgotten, because it only has 400 meters, I think, of the Danube, but it's very important nevertheless, and is an important neighbor of Ukraine because it's not directly been attacked, but it's under hybrid threats from the Russian Federation. I'm, of course, talking about Moldova. Nadia, what, as an observer of the situation and as a country that is under this direct aggression, where do you see challenges, but also the future of this tiny neighboring country?
From Ukraine, we see a very clear perspective for Moldova to stop the actually direct aggression, because they do have Transnistria for many years, and that was a direct aggression for their territory. At the same time, we perfectly understand that Moldova is very dependent, now less, but even several months ago, it was very dependent from the energy resources of Russia, even more than other EU countries. And we understand that there is indirect threat as well inside Moldova. I'm talking about mass media, I'm talking about political parties, which are now rather active on the level of destabilizing the situation. They are using this opportunity with the rising prices of gas and electricity to put in the dark side of the Moldovan government for now. this is actually a very big threat for Ukraine as well, because having in Moldova such kind of threats, we need to pay attention not to the front line from the east, but also to the front line from Transnistria. It was a threat for us when the Russian army was moving through Mykolaiv and the Odessa region from the Black Sea. And it was a very critical situation when they were very close to the border with Transnistria, and it was a situation that they can just make this kind of round, but together with Transnistrians, I mean those Russian army which is partially there still. And for us it will be, the task of defense will be even more complicated. For now, due to our armed forces, this is not possible. And if you see the developments in Transnistria, they actually are a little bit lighter, a little bit silent there. So they do not have these so-called attacks within Transnistria that they had, like a kind of in the form of the theater, even I can say, because you cannot name this the real attack. From perspective of Ukraine, for Moldova, this is a kind of the golden period to solve the problem of Transnistria once and forever. And our armed forces, our government already told that if you will ask us, we will help you if you want this. The point is that there is no readiness from Moldovan government to support. For a period of time, they even haven't expressed their real support of Ukraine. It was support of Ukraine, but it was not any kind of visit to Ukraine from Moldovan president. It was later, still later. But again, I think this is only because of their unreadiness to act, and they still are afraid of the pressure which they do have from the eastern side. But again, on my opinion, they should use this opportunity, and they can use it very easy to finalize the conflict on their territory.
Okay, thank you. I would have a couple of follow-up questions, but we are running out of time, and I try to sort of bridge the gap to a very different topic now from a quite serious one, especially with regards to, of course, the upcoming presidency. And before I ask you what we can expect here, because I think it's a nice possibility to give an outlook, I would like to ask Teresa, within this framework, we've heard that there is the intention to work together with other stakeholders, and what is the ARGE Donauländer planning of doing within the framework of this cooperation for the Austrian presidency?
Yeah, I think it's a much lighter topic now following this one, but I will try. Yeah, we are looking forward to the presidency in 2024 and starting actually in November next year. And the working community wants to use the opportunity of having this focus on Austria and with a presidency here. And so we already had talks concerning how we can get involved. For sure, we will have the Danube Salon in 2024 as a focus on our presidency, the Austrian presidency. We have to see what topic at the time will be fitting, but I'm pretty sure it will concern something along the lines of rebuilding, I hope. And another cooperation that's already been discussed with Lower Austria is the possibility to use our House of Digitalization in Tulln. which will be opened in the beginning of 2023. So this is our lighthouse project for digitalization within Lower Austria, and the topic of digitalization is just still very relevant. We saw it, how volatile it is when faced with the pandemic, but in general. So I think these two points we already kind of put a check on it, and the rest I think will be established in the next month, and we are very excited for being part of the presidency as well.
Thank you very much. So, and the last maybe brief outlook into what we can expect. Also, maybe at that time we don't have to deal with the fallout from pandemics and wars, hopefully, anymore.
Yes, I think you can really expect a very committed Austrian presidency with high ambitions. And what makes me really optimistic to achieve this goal is not only the remarks by Theresa Stummer on the cooperation with Niederösterreich, but also a very supportive context. In fact, this starts perhaps from a foreign policy perspective, with the Danube region being part of Austria's foreign policy DNA, so to say, close cultural, historic, scientific ties with the region, people-to-people contacts. 500,000 people with roots in the Western Balkans and Danube regions have found a new home in Austria. All these are bridge builders. In fact, the political and economic interests in the region also of Austria should also mention, among largest trading partner and investor in the whole region. But having said this, more important is, of course, also that, as I said before, as a result of this war and the new situation in the region, there's a new momentum for cooperation in the Danube area and also for the Danube strategy. And even more so, to put it in a larger context and framework, I mean, we have this new European Union initiative of European political community, so-called Macron initiative, and also within that is the idea to establish role models for regional cooperation, macro-regional cooperation, and of course this new European political community works also with the idea of close cooperation between European Union members and not yet members, candidate countries and others. So I think Danube area again is here, I think, really a good example where we could show the way and lead also this process. Then, of course, we've mentioned already the fact that the Danube strategy point is seated in Vienna is also very helpful. Then I have a very experienced colleague as co-national coordinator sitting also in the room, Roland Abter from the Ministry of Regional Development, and also very experienced and committed priority area coordinators. We've heard also that the Bundesländer, the federal provinces, are really playing a very committed role. They're helping us, I'm sure. Vienna, Lower Austria, Upper Austria, strong involvement, I think, can be expected. So I think all the ingredients are there to prepare for a really committed Austrian presidency. And to conclude, just a couple of words on the process, because also this is interesting, and also explaining to you and some of stakeholders sitting in the room that we're happy, of course, to cooperate also in this process leading up to starting our presidency. We have now begun to identify priorities. So there is a kind of a presidency task force led by the two national coordinators, by Roland and myself, where we try to have this process as inclusive as possible. There is, of course, the NCs steering the process, but also a very close cooperation with the priority area coordinators and the DSB. Of course, also then trying to take advantage of the fact that the Danube Region program with very interesting, useful projects can also help in a way us to give substance to the presidency. And there is a mapping process ongoing. So we are collecting ideas and proposals right now. Some of ideas and proposals I will take out of the room today, and I think by spring next year, I hope, and that we can offer kind of at least raw outlook on our priorities, on specific projects we want to implement. Also a presidency calendar with hopefully also high-profile meetings where we still have to work on political ownership, as always, for this initiative. but which is really very, very important. And this came out also of today's discussion, and this is my last sentence is, I think we have to really try to do our best to address real challenges of the Danube region, transport, energy, people skills, economic development, innovation, digitization. I think we have really to come up with concrete answers to all these issues and questions. We'll work, of course, also very strongly following the path of previous presidencies on youth involvement, empowerment, involving also civic society, science, scientific organization, institutions. And I think, I'm afraid I have to say, I think the issue of safety and security, again, a bit the foreign policy issue, will not leave us, will not go away, will not fade away, and also this will be, for good, for bad, rather for bad, I think also on the priority list of Austria's presidency for the Danube strategy.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to everyone on the panel, but also to everyone in the room. If you want to pitch ideas for the Austrian presidency, use the opportunity. Now you heard the invitation. For me, it has been an outstanding pleasure for several reasons, not only because I really like to talk about this topic, I really enjoy moderating and talking with my wonderful panelists, but also because when I came to Austria 8 years ago to work for IDM, I remember around that time, because there was also a Christmas tree in that room, I was sitting there in the back, somewhere where Daniela Uschitz is sitting, and I was attending a conference. I don't remember which was the topic, actually. 8 years take its toll, but I was in this room and I was very impressed by this room already back then, and now it's a very honor and a great pleasure to be sitting in the stage here and give you the final announcements, which are, we are going to have a break until 12:45 now, and this is very, very important because then comes the cultural aspect of our conference. We will have a dance performance and then, of course, a second panel afterwards. So the dance performance starts here at 12:45. You are not allowed, and I think it's pretty clear why, to bring things from the buffet into that room. So now use the opportunity, pitch some ideas, get more information from our panelists, enjoy the refreshments, but then leave them there. Be back at 12:45 and we'll have, I can tell you, a fantastic dance performance then, and the reception is next door. Thank you very much for the questions, attendance, etc. And now get some refreshments. Thank you.
Thank you.
So allow me to use this very short break because we were going to see another performance. The dancers are quickly changing. To introduce our artists of today, our two dancers. This was Solomon Osasura. He was born in Vienna. The family of his mother comes from Ukraine and they still live there. He graduated from the Vienna State Opera Ballet Academy in 2019. And after graduating, Solomon danced with the Czech Ballet, State Ballet in Brno. And with him was Elsa Ingeborg. She completed her dance training in Vienna and is currently a freelance dancer. And she's studying environmental engineering at the TU Wien. And they performed now a piece, a classical duet called Der Schwan, choreography by Michael Sosnovsky, who was born in Moldova, and he's a soloist of the Wiener Staatsballet. So you can see already we have also the region on the stage, also in the cultural sense. So we will have a very short break. You can ask questions, or we will just take a short break and wait till they're ready, and then we see the second performance will be a neoclassical duet called Corsair. So now that we're filled with food and inspiration by these cultural inputs, I welcome you back to the second panel of the Danube Conference this year. The afternoon session is dedicated to the challenges of cross-border cooperation along the Danube in times of emergencies. Due to the diverse issues the region faces today, we invited experts from very different fields and backgrounds, and I would like to introduce on the panel Gertrud Heidvogel. She's a senior researcher at the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences, BOKU, with a focus on cultural history and ecology. Gertrud, please come to the panel. Also with us is now Artur Lorkowski, the director of the energy community located in Vienna. Please have a seat here next to me. And we also have a representative from the University of Continuing Education. Sarah Meyer is with us. She's a principal investigator for the project RegioPal at the same university, and especially particularly at the Department for European Policy and Study of Democracy. So, Sarah, please take a seat. And also with us is Olga Pintiuk, who is working as an economist at the Vienna Institute for International Economic Studies, the WIIW. So, with this panel, as I said, we cover a very broad portfolio of topics and expertises, but I think all these areas, economy, energy, democracy, environment, all the areas are facing different emergencies such as climate change, rising prices, social inequalities, and democratic backsliding, as well as, for example, this general rising skepticism towards science and also towards democracy or democratic institutions. So most of these issues are actually part of a global struggle, as we already wrote in our program, but they all have their regional and local specifics. And we would like to use the Danube today and its river systems to kind of find common denominators to talk about these emergencies from a regional, as we always do, from a cross-border perspective. So I would like to start with the Danube itself, that brings us here, I think, and with Gertrud, who is a renowned expert and who has been working on the environmental history of rivers for years. So I would like to ask you to give us a short overview of the main threats, the main pressures that the Danube is and the Danube Basin is currently facing. What emergency do you think is pressing most at the moment?
Okay, so good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me say that I'm sorry that I'm here with a mask. I have definitely not COVID, that's for sure, but I have nevertheless a cold, and I would prefer to not infect someone else. So I hope it's working well with the microphone. I think it does, at least what I hear. Well, coming to the question of Daniela, I think the Danube, from an ecological perspective, exhibits really quite a lot of ecological and environmental problems which have evolved over time. And there are, in fact, definitely also regional differences when it comes to these ecological problems. The Upper Danube, for example, has been transformed really in a very technical manner into a shipping route and a hydropower producer. And this results really in very strong so-called hydromorphological alterations, which means simply that the shape of the river has been changed totally. In contrast, the middle and the lower Danube, for example, they have less hydromorphological change, but there are a lot of different aspects of pollution that can be organic pollution, but also pollution with chemical substances, also hazardous substances, etc. The ecological problems are quite well known because there are different international organizations. I can maybe come to that a little bit later, which investigate this ecological status of the Danube really since, meanwhile, 25 years or so. What is very evident is when one is looking at regional aspects and the need for cross-border and even basin-wide cooperation, is that rivers or river networks in general link all the regions through which they flow. What happens in the upstream side, at an upstream section of a river network, concerns people downstream. One of the best known examples is sediment transport, which might be blocked, for instance, by hydropower dams. And then downstream sections suffer sediment leak, for example. It works, by the way, also in the opposite direction when downstream activities can also affect things which happen upstream when it comes, for example, to the very threatened and partly even extinct Danube sturgeon species. When they are overexploited or their migrations are blocked by hydropower dams, then the sturgeons get simply extinct in upper sections. So the fact that rivers are connected systems clearly call on the one hand for regional actions, but it's definitely necessary to link these and to coordinate these on an overarching basin-wide level. Just one, for me, important aspect or important remark I would like to make when it comes to the question, what is the most important ecological problem? I think some of those which I mentioned, hydromorphological alteration, pollution, but also biodiversity change, they are all very pressing. But as someone who is originally trained in social sciences or humanity fields, I would say the most pressing issue is cooperation and exchange between ecologists, conservationists, but also social scientists, because I am deeply convinced that the pressing problems of the Danube can be only solved when there is really a clear interaction between the societal and the environmental sphere.
Okay, thank you for this. I understand it's a very hard task to sum this up in one statement, but I think you did it quite well and understandable. If you're interested a bit more on the topic also ecology along the Danube, we just published the new Info Europa in German. It's lying outside, it will be in the Presse tomorrow as a supplement, and it will be also online as an e-paper starting from tomorrow. We have one story on the sturgeons and how hydropower plants, particularly the iron gates, kind of block their ways and change the complete habitats of this amazing animal, actually. And so thanks very much for this introduction. We think cross-sectionally today, so we jump right from one emergency to the other. And here I would like to turn to you, Arthur, as the director of the energy community. You're working in one of the most crucial sectors right now, of course. What are the main challenges for the energy community in these days and weeks?
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me and for this privilege being with you today. And indeed, energy is very much at the center of the discussions we are observing right now in the region, covering by Danube initiatives, but also more broadly in the European neighborhood. I would say that we have three key challenges. One is the security of supply of energy, and I will elaborate on that. The issue of affordability of energy, which is the second, equally important, and the third one is the energy transition, which is more mid-term and long-term need, but this is also very much appealing right now. When it comes to the security of supply, you can look at the situation in Ukraine, which is the contracting party to the energy community, where we can observe the majority of the energy infrastructure, including the critical infrastructure for energy system, being continuously sheltered and destroyed by the Russian army. And that creates significant threats for ability of Ukrainian energy sector to provide electricity, gas and heating to not only the companies in Ukraine, which are suffering very much from the economic point of view, but also to the consumers, the households, the families. And this is a key challenge we are observing right now in the energy community, and this is something which is obsessing us and causing that we are focusing almost exclusively on that issue to make the Ukrainian energy sector able again to supply the services to the population, to the society, and to the industries in Ukraine. This crisis has spillover effects, and let me move a little bit to the south, closer to the Danube, and I would like to touch upon another contracting party. This is the Moldova, and this country is also being very much affected by the war, but at the same time not being destroyed like in case of Ukraine, but also with fundamental problems when it comes to the access to the energy. The country being blackmailed by Gazprom when it comes to the supplies of both gas and not directly but indirectly electricity, because in Moldova electricity is produced on gas, is equally exposed to the emergencies we are observing in the region. Having said that, I would like to underline, however, that for this country, especially the problem of affordability of energy is of a permanent importance right now, because there is an electricity and gas available on the market, but the price which is on the European market is simply not affordable for them. And that's why the issue is more in case of Moldova, the issue of the access in the economic terms, not in the physical terms, to the electricity, gas, and the heat, especially for this winter season. But this problem of affordability is not specific in Moldova only. This is the issue which is very much also present in the Western Balkan countries, where we can observe the soaring energy prices causing the problem of energy poverty we never experienced in that dimension before in the region. And this is something which is to be recognized, how the pauperization of the societies is going hand in hand with the growing energy prices and more general economic downturn. And the third challenge we observe right now for all of the contracting parties, but I think this is also applicable to the European Union, is the energy transition. Energy transition which is aiming for decoupling from the fossil fuels, especially the fossil fuels from Russia, but also in a more pro-climate, cleaner and greener energy in the future. And this is a huge challenge, both in terms of the regulatory regime we are offering to these countries to speed up that process, but also in the financial, when it comes to the financial conditions of the process. So to what extent the sufficient money has been already accumulated to ensure that this process could be deployed in the way which would be satisfactory for both consumers and the industries in these countries. So this is a very complex situation, both of the very emergency and short-term needs, as I explained, for example, how to access the energy and gas, electricity for this winter to ensure these systems to be reconnected to the consumers, but on the other hand, these mid-term and long-term emergencies which are connected with energy transition and climate policies in these countries.
Thank you very much for structuring also this very complex issue for us in three main challenges, and I think we will at least come back to the topic or pillar of transition, because it's also connected to the first emergency that we were talking of. So I would like to continue with the perspective of an economist and Ukraine expert. It's very great to have you here and also to explain us a little bit and give us insights about the economic perspective. Obviously, the country's economy is seriously suffering under the aggression of Russian forces. Nevertheless, there are a few, let's say, aspects for hope, or at least some positive sides, reactions by the regions, by neighbor countries, also announcements by EU and US to help with reconstruction. Yeah, so I would like you to ask you to analyze a little bit the current situation for us. Tell us what are the main emergencies in your perspective, and also what could be regional contributions to reduce this and tackle these emergencies.
Yeah, thank you. So I will focus on Ukraine in this part. Okay. I mean, thank you for my colleague who talked about energy, because this is a really big part of the issue which Ukraine has to face. Obviously, as you said, given the circumstances, the Ukrainian economy cannot perform well. However, until recently, until the attacks on the energy infrastructure started, the Ukrainian economy actually showed a lot of resilience, and there was, in a way, partial recoveries. There were increasingly more enterprises resuming their activity, adjusting to the new situation, rearranging the supply chain, routes, logistics, etc., and there was a slowdown of decline. So in a way, over summer months, there was some picking up of economic activity. What helped a lot, you already referred to the grain corridor, which was negotiated with the help of UN and Turkey. And this was crucial for Ukraine to be able to export a lot of its grain. Otherwise, there would be really big issues, not only in the agricultural sector of the country, but in the whole global supply of food. This helped to mitigate food prices shock, and we already observed that food prices started to decline globally owing to this. It's not going smoothly. It's still a lot of barriers there, and it's not clear whether the agreement will be prolonged, under what conditions. A lot of uncertainty, a lot of sabotage on the Russia side, because it needs to be inspected by commissions. This is, where there is human factor, there always can be some room for play. This is getting delayed, etc. Using river as a mode of transport, unfortunately, is not really a big part of a solution, because it has never been perceived as a route, so it's not possible in the short time frame to rebuild infrastructure, because it's not only the tracks which are not consistent between countries, but there are not enough carriages, there are not enough grain storage facilities all over Europe. There are not enough ports on the river which would handle that volume of grain which Ukraine wants to export. So this is not changing, not helping much. But now with this energy infrastructure being constantly under attack, of course, this has tremendous effect, and businesses not able to function. There is some adjustment. People are very resourceful in Ukraine. They switch to buying diesel generators. which is not very good for the environment, but in these circumstances, I guess that becomes less of a priority. People are buying Starlink satellite units, so it's like many companies have them, even households who have access to the roof, if they can afford it, they buy this to have access to internet. But now it's a question whether there will be, whether a big part of population will be again forced to go abroad, because over summer around 2 million people came back from Europe to Ukraine. That was a sign of, actually, it was another sign of situation getting better as well economically. Yeah, so the area in Kiev and suburbs, they were getting rebuilt, even though there is war going on, but the rebuilding is taking place all the time, and people were coming back. It's now a question whether they can survive the winter, because basically it becomes existential now, the threat. Yeah, it's, some parts of Ukraine are on the edge, on the verge of humanitarian catastrophe. So yeah, energy now becomes a crucial thing, and I do not see how it can be really solved, because from what I understood talking to some experts, it's really a problem to repair now because of the lack of all the spare parts. It's all these transformators which now being destroyed by shelling. They are usually some old, still from Soviet times, the equipment. There are no spare parts which can be taken anywhere, and in order for Europe to produce this volume of equipment which Ukraine needs, like of a modern type, it takes half a year to build one transformator. So this is going to be like a major issue in the short run. Yeah, I guess this is the most critical part at the moment. The economy still functions, so the grain being shipped and everything which is possible is being done, but it remains to be seen how critical the bombing will be for the near future.
Thank you. Coming from the defenders of democracy in Ukraine to the democracy itself, kind of a prerequisite, I would say, for regional cooperation, at least a broad one and a deep one. So we talked about the energy sector, the economic sector, now we talk about democracy, and I'm very happy that you're here and present a little bit what you're also doing in your project RegioPal. You're investigating the role of subnational regional actors in EU politics. So also the potentials, the constraints in this multi-level governance structure. So it's also a complex topic, I would say, and I think there is anyway not much research done on regional actors. So it's great that you're here, and I would like to know more about your research when it comes especially to cross-border cooperations within these regional actors. What can we actually expect from regions? What shouldn't we expect from regions? And where are the limitations and the potentials to tackle emergencies?
Yes, thank you so much for the invitation. As you just mentioned, our focus in our project is more on a more abstract level, it's on the functioning of democratic institutions within the EU multi-level context. And there, of course, we have the multi-level in the whole understanding or self-understanding of the European Union. And quite often we have a focus on the so-called first and second level, which is the European and the national level, and not so much focus on the third level, which is the subnational level or the regional level, as we call it in our research. And of course, with regard to cross-border cooperation, I mean, that's something that does not only apply to the Danube region, but more generally. We did a lot of research. We did workshops with members from regional MPs, but we also did a survey among members of regional parliaments in 7 different EU member states, Western and Eastern, but also more federal and more centralized states, so with covering regions that have quite different political circumstances when it comes to regional authority to self-rule. And to start with your last question about also challenges in times of emergencies and crisis, what of course we can always observe in times of serious also political crisis is a tendency towards decision making at the highest level, which is of course at some point necessary. You need quick decisions. Sometimes it's politically extremely salient. We've seen that of course now in times of war, but we've also, and with regard to discussions at the European level when it comes to energy, etc. But we've also all witnessed that during the pandemic, where you can also witness it within individual states when decisions are taken at the highest level, and then there are lots of complaints from the regional or sub-national levels that actors and institutions have not been involved properly. So I think this is a challenge, of course, and it's always important to keep in mind this balance between effective decision making and quick decisions on the one hand, and then also participation, involvement of actors at other territorial, political or administrative levels that are close to citizens, that are close to the needs in regions. And I think this applies, of course, also to the Danube region as such. And when it comes to cross-border cooperation, we also asked in our survey, of course now I'm talking about regional MPs, members of regional parliaments, so it's a specific part of actors, of course. But since regions do not have their own decision-making channels at the European level, it's even more important for regions to find other ways, other channels to get involved with each other and to support each other and to, let's say, to have a regional voice that they can also make heard at the European level, but also in other neighboring countries. So cross-border cooperation is very important. And what we could see from our survey when we explicitly asked the members of the parliament with which actors they cooperate on EU matters, of course, that was the question. It was quite interesting that we saw that the own regional context is still very important. And this applied to all the regions, irrespective of whether they are from more federalized or more centralized states, with some differences, of course, but generally the regional actors are still very important, but then there are also some European level institutions and actors that are important, like the European Parliament, for instance. So I find that very interesting that we have also, let's say, not cross-border cooperation between regions, but also between the various political levels. So you have sub-national actors actively engaging with European level actors, and so parliamentary actors that are connecting to each other. But then, of course, there's also cooperation in different kinds of institutions or institutions or platforms that are created. And one important response when asked about what are the main challenges, what is hindering you from getting more involved in EU affairs, because all the actors that we asked, or mainly a huge majority, agrees that this is very important. I mean, EU policies implemented at the regional level, and we also see that now with the situation in Ukraine, that EU solutions, that EU frameworks and programs are very important, not only for member states, but also for other countries, for candidate countries and potential candidate countries, etc. So it's very important that these actors are also involved in EU affairs. And if they asked about the main challenge for their own engagement in EU affairs, the answer was time. So they have a lot of other issues to do. It's not their main task. They're responsible for other aspects. A lot of them are quite interested, but then they don't have enough time to do so. And this is one aspect that, helping them to foster cross-border cooperation is, I think, one of the most important tasks, and also something that we experienced in the workshops, where we did some workshops also in regional parliaments and some qualitative interviews. And this was also something, a lot of them responded to us, that it's often very welcome to have formats, specific formats and channels where this cooperation is fostered, and there's a lot of activity going on in that respect, which is good for democracy in the end.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we are running out of time, not on this panel yet, but in terms of climate emergencies, definitely. So I would like to know, switch to the academic level a little bit and ask how the cross-border cooperation is working in the Danube region on the academic level. You're member representing the member country Austria in the International Association for Danube Research, IAD, and I would like to know a little bit more about it, please. What are you doing? How do you cooperate among scientists and water managers to improve the quality of rivers in the Danube Basin? But maybe also, how do you go to the public? How do you engage in a broader audience?
Okay. Well, the International Association for Danube Research is one of the oldest associations in the Danube region. It was founded in 1956, so it's not as old as IDM, but nevertheless quite old. And it was founded definitely to foster scientific cooperation in the 1950s, at the time when there was still the very strong divide in Western and Eastern European countries. And this, I have to say, was quite successful, because one of the best books on the ecology of the Danube still stems from that time. It was published in the late 1960s. The IAD is still active, and it is, as you indicated, basically a scientific organization. And in that way, it's a, I would say it's a quite loose association, which has definitely an international body, some international activities, like a journal, which is, by the way, available via internet. It has international activities such as the normally biannual conferences, and it has also, or it strongly depends also, the international association on the regional and national groups. So every country has also a national group, and these are it's very different how these national groups are formalized. In Austria, for example, it's really an association, so we have to do our regular meetings and so on and so on. When it comes to cooperation with water managers and other sectors, as I said, the IAD is clearly an organization with a very strong scientific focus. But there is cooperation, regular cooperation with water managers in a very wide sense, or water management in general, because IAD has really a quite good reputation, especially for ecological topics. Most of the different expert groups cover or are related to different ecological topics. And in that way, IAD experts from very different countries contribute to regional, but also to international surveys. And there is really a very strong cooperation between different types of water managers. It's not so easy to generalize that because in some countries there is a closer cooperation, in other countries there is a looser cooperation, which depends also a little bit on the question how conflictuous environmental and ecological targets are discussed. So I would say in a very general way, in the Upper Danube, the cooperation with water managers seems to be a little bit better than in countries of the Lower Danube, where many aspects in terms of the ecological conditions of the Danube are still very conflictuous, which touches also other topics which we can discuss maybe also later a little bit. So I think that's the main activities of the IAD as an association.
I don't know if you agree, but I also observed a strong cooperation, a starting cooperation of scientists and also activists when it comes to the Danube basin and its tributary rivers in the recent years. And this has to do, of course, with the increase of hydropower and the building of hydropower in the lower Danube area in Southeast Europe in general, I would say. So there are many protests, there are many issues, but there is also much potential, of course. And there I would like to go further to Mr. Lokowski. What do you think from an expert in the energy sector? Does hydropower in the Danube region have a lot of potential? Is this having a golden future? Or will other renewable energy sources be more in the focus?
I would say rather there was a golden past, because the hydropower technologies, they are quite broadly dispersed through the Danube region generally, specifically in Ukraine, but also in the Western Balkan countries. However, what is to be realized right now is that the issue of the access to the water is becoming the issue. So because of the climate change, because of the warming of the temperature, the water reservoirs are limited, that we could observe last winter some problems with the generation based on the hydropower because of the scarcity of the water resources in these countries. Having said that, it does not exclude the development of the new projects when it comes to the hydropower generation. However, some environmental and aspects are to be recognized in this regard. As the Energy Committee Secretariat, we are already engaged in some cases between the investors, potential investors, and the environmental protection agencies, and we are trying to figure out how to go out from some problematic situation that have been caused in the past by not accepting or by not recognizing the environmental rules in the region in the proper way. So this is still the issue, and we hope we will be able to help the contracting parties to deal with that issue by suggesting some more stringent procedures when it comes to the location, for example, of the hydropower investments in the future. So the issue of permitting is key one, and we hope to stabilize this system in the contracting parties, and that will be on one of the topics we're gonna to focus in 2023. However, I would like to emphasize that this region has an enormous potential when it comes to renewables. Only in solar technologies, according to the estimations made by IRENA, there is a potential of 13 gigawatts of capacities to be installed still. So this is huge potential to be harvested, and the same applies to the onshore wind power generation, and we estimate this capacity for 24 gigawatts to be installed. So we can see that this is something which is to be tapped. And the big asset is the infrastructure, which is basically existing especially in the Western Balkan countries. According to our estimation, there is enough flexibility when it comes to the grid operation to absorb this new potential without significant investment in the grid. So this is a very good information, because for many European countries the grid is a bottleneck when it comes to development of the renewable energies. But the question is how to boost this potential, how to exploit this potential, and that is the reason why in 2 weeks from now or more, Energy Community Ministerial Council will adopt, I hope, the targets, including the target for renewables, and this target would stipulate the objective for the whole energy community for renewables at the level of 31%. So we expect that this is something which might help the contracting parties to establish the systems which are necessary for the proper deployment and rolling out the renewable technologies in these countries. One of these elements which could support the implementation of the targets is the system of the guarantees of origin. So basically the concept is how to issue the guarantees of origin for renewables in the contracting parties and make them tradable for the European Union, so that if, for example, a manufacturer in Europe would like to have a production based fully on the renewables, it can virtually buy the certificate issued in the contracting parties and to get a better price for this electricity based on renewables exclusively. And this kind of systems, including corporate PPAs, etc., they are being considered right now to support the implementation of the target, as I mentioned, to be adopted on 15th December by the Ministerial Council of the Energy Community. So there is potential, but what we need more stable regulatory regime, regulatory framework to exploit this potential. And this, by the way, that's the reason why I'm traveling tonight to Belgrade to have discussion tomorrow with the Serbian minister, how to open some reforms aiming at having more and more renewables in the energy sector of this country specifically.
Thank you. Also, thank you for emphasizing the ecological aspects and the fact that we should not neglect that when thinking and implementing this transformation. Maybe here a short side note when it comes to the golden past, because even if it might be the golden past, it's not for the ecology. The legacy of this so-called golden past, of course, is still visible and has its effect. So I found on this IID website the information that in the so-called Amber Atlas, this atlas locates 45,000 dams in the Danube River basin. This is quite an enormous number, I think, for someone who is not familiar with that. So these are the documented dams. There are also a few or many undocumented barriers that have actual effects on the river and on the species that are living there. And I find it interesting that about 28,000 barriers are actually located in Austria of this number. So that's also interesting, I think, if we look at our country. Sometimes you have this narrative of when it comes to ecological concerns that we have been doing anyway so much, and now it's time for the countries downstream to implement the same things and do the same efforts. So have you also observed this kind of double standard in the perception when it comes to that?
Yes, I think that's definitely something, especially when it comes, as you mentioned, to hydropower dams. Which is an engineering or a hydraulic structure which alters the river as a habitat for animals and aquatic organisms. As I said before, it results especially in the upper Danube, and not only in the Danube River, but also in the tributaries, in a very strong alteration of the hydromorphology of the river. So that's definitely something where there is a difference between the upper and especially the lower Danube and their tributaries that, as I said already before, there is lower morphological alterations. And this has, of course, also consequences on the way of how ecologists and conservationists, what they are claiming. Because in the upper Danube, the focus is thus very much on river restoration. And I mean, as you said, I am not an ecologist, and I hope ecologists will not blame me for that observation and saying it. I think when it comes to river restoration, it's much easier to to try to find a compromise between an ecological status and the use of a river. Because very often in Austria, for example, also for the implementation of the European Water Framework Directive, re-establishing the so-called longitudinal connectivity of the river, which means opening the river again via fish passes, for example. It's really a very high priority. And it's a restoration measure or restoration measures which have been implemented very often in the last, I would say, 2 decades or so, also for the Danube hydropower plants. It might be a little bit more critical in the countries especially of the lower Danube, because there are still some or very large nature-like areas remain, river sections, floodplains, etc. And here the main target is, of course, conservation. The main target is to conserve, to preserve an existing situation which has from the beginning less the, the automatic necessity to harmonize and finding compromise between ecological and societal targets. But nevertheless, it's of course very important that also in Southeast and in Eastern Europe, environmental and ecological conditions are properly really respected, for example, in a way to define so-called no-go areas for certain river uses when it comes really to very high, to areas of very high nature protection importance or ecological importance. So to sum this up, yes, there is a little bit a double standard, but nevertheless it has to be also analyzed and solved to not to put too much pressure on on Southeast or East European Danube countries, that they have to preserve their whole nature because they also have to make their social living, and this means unfortunately often to use rivers also for certain human uses. Hydropower is just one.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let's go back or continue with energy infrastructure, because when we look at Ukraine, infrastructure as power plants are crucial, in a crucial focus or targeted by Russian aggression a lot. So what would you say, Olga, how are questions of resilience when it comes to a regional level, like for example Europeanization of networks, of infrastructure, energy solidarity, everything that is cross-border, let's say, how will it be important and will it be really crucial from an economic point as well?
I mean, we can look now at the EU. Now the issue of economic solidarity is at the forefront, right? Because it refers to gas supplies policies. It refers to electricity distribution between countries. So Ukraine now, it's like not really a big part of the picture, but the situation into which the war brought Europe, it just highlights the issues of, let me say, political design the European Union has, among other things in the energy sphere, because there was a lot of backlash, for example, with Germany decision to support its households and businesses with subsidies, which was seen not very favorably by other countries, thinking that it's distorting the market, increasing demand of German households for energy, etc. The EU demands that each country has capacity to export about 15% of all the electricity produced. So to have the solidarity in this sphere, so that if there is some emergency in one country, it can rely on other countries in this respect. The same goes for gas supplies. Now Hungary got a special agreement with Putin on stability of gas supplies for the next year, I believe. So if many more countries start to go that route, it would really increase Russia's bargaining power in this situation. And this is something which I think the EU wants to avoid from the energy security point of view, because the whole mess in terms of energy prices we found ourselves now is to a large extent because of oversight on the side of Germany and some other countries in terms of their dependence on Russia as a major provider of fuel. Right, so, and there are many risks that some dependencies will remain or even increase. Like now there is increased import of liquefied natural gas from Russia, right? Europe is importing much more than in other years before. Where are we heading with that? How will it be solved? It's very difficult for the EU to agree on any sanctions with respect to gas, even oil price cap. This is tricky. There is no consensus. And yeah, so I just, talked a lot about issues. How they all will be resolved, it's not clear. On the bright side, the EU always seems to function the best in terms of crisis. That's when some major solutions are designed, and hopefully, this will be again a situation when there will be some silver lining in the end, right? And coming back to Ukraine, of course, infrastructure will need massive investment to be rebuilt. It's always been repaired, in Ukraine. It's electric engineers and firefighters, they're considered to be superheroes now, because they managed to restore power supplies in such extreme conditions. But everything has its limit, the capacity. There would need to be a major investment. But I think there can be really a win-win for the EU here and for all the countries in the Danube region, because Ukraine has potential to become actually a major energy exporter. And I'm not talking not only about carbohydrate fuel, but all sorts of green energy, like hydrogen, biomass, etc. There is a lot of potential there. Ukraine in this respect is quite richly endowed with different sources of energy, different materials, including rare earth minerals, which are crucial for producing sun batteries, right? So Ukraine could provide Europe with this as well. So can be a lot of investment into infrastructure after the war is gone, and all the parties will benefit eventually, I hope so.
We're all just waiting for the war to end.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Before we start the audience questions, so please be prepared. I would like to take one keyword that you mentioned, the political design of the EU, because that brings us to you, Sarah. when it comes to regional actors, regional MEPs, for example, but also in general the participation of regional actors, how does the EU needs to change to improve their participation, to really use the potential?
Well, that's an extremely difficult question because, of course, there are also always desires and wishes from the regional level, of course. But then, in the end, again, this is a question of balance of power, of course, and it's always like a conflict, a potential conflict of objectives, as I just said before, between effective decision making on the one hand and keeping potential veto players at a minimum in terms of numbers, and there are quite a lot already with 27 member states in the House. And now if you consider that you would have an additional decision-making channel, for instance, that would make decision-making much more complicated. But of course, there are many other ways, and there are also institutions there at the European level, like for instance the Committee of the Regions, and also there are intrastate channels that member states created for having their regional actors and representatives included in the position taking on EU matters, like on the national position that then the government is going to represent in the council, or the head of state or government represents then in the European Council. So there are various channels, and then there are of course also informal ways of getting involved. But there are also here again challenges in terms of keeping in mind that you don't want to introduce procedures that then in the end create even more bureaucratization, because this is something else that everybody is always complaining about when it comes to EU decision making and EU policy making more generally. So this is not easy to balance all these different interests, which are of course all legitimate interests, but you have to keep that in mind when asking about how the EU should change. And I think it also brings us to how several challenges and issues are cannot be tackled in isolation from one and the other. And if we, for instance, consider the EU future debate that is continuing currently, and where there are also questions of how the EU architecture, how the institutions should work together, what kind of competences might be better located at the European level in the future. There was a lot of enthusiasm on this kind of process after the pandemic then, and now we have you have different opinions here, of course, between member states, but also between EU institutions, and of course also within regions you have different interests. And now I'm picking up on something that I think Teresa said already in the morning panel, that there is a lot of regional diversity within the Danube region, but also within the whole European Union, not only when it comes to their political structures. As I said before, we have centralized states, we have federal states, but also with regard to economic power and population size, etc. And this all gives you a clue on sometimes interests just different. There's not one common regional interest, and I think these aspects are very important to keep in mind also when it comes to cooperation between regions, but also when it comes to how the EU, I mean the EU is not only one actor, it's composed of member states that have a lot to say. Of course, this has to be kept in mind to take all this diversity seriously without creating channels that would lead to over-bureaucratization, etc., etc. And quite often from our workshops and the interviews and the interaction we had with various representatives, political representatives from the regional level, two things I want to mention from that. First of all, we saw a lot of, and I think this was also something you mentioned before, there was a lot of, let's put it like that, positive spirit in terms of cooperation, will for cooperation at the regional level. and we saw that also between different political groups, so that was not a question of from which political groups representatives were. And the other thing is quite often the feedback to us was, because we also asked representatives, okay, what kind of EU would you like to have, and what kind of representation would you like to see for regions at the EU level? What kind of involvement would you like to see? And quite often the answer was, well, we want to be heard, and we want to have the impression to be heard, and so that it's not unimportant what we say. It's not always that they want to make the decisions. Regional representatives have always been quite aware of the different levels where political decisions are taken, but it's very important that their voice is being heard and taken seriously. This was something that clearly came out from our research. And I think that's an answer to what the EU and all the actors involved there and the member states should do, whether it's directly at the European level or within their own intrastate structures.
Thank you. So keeping the diversity in mind, not expecting unified opinions and visions on the European future maybe, and also a lesson learned from this panel and the past years maybe. So we will open the discussion now, and I hope you prepared also one or two difficult questions. We have time, so we have one question here. I will still look for others. If there's any other, then please.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Krauchenberg, Institute Danube Region, Central Europe, board member. I have a question mainly to Mr. Lorkowski, maybe also to Mrs. Pindyuk. It's concerning energy supply. Now, Xi Jinping years ago said China cannot allow itself to be dependent more than 25% in energy supply from one country. We got in Austria dependent in gas 80%, in Germany is 50%, in some countries, Southeastern Europe 100%. Let's remember Bulgaria, once gas was cut, I think it was 2009, no gas, people sitting in cold rooms. In the meanwhile, since October, there is an interconnector from Danube pipeline getting Azeri gas to Bulgaria, and Bulgarians said they don't need a new contract with Gazprom anymore, for the time being at least. We have a huge potential offshore in Romania, which could be sufficient for Romania, Moldova in reverse flow, and also Central Europe. And then we have Kirk Island, for instance, LNG terminal, which is going to be expanded, and Austria will also get now LNG from Kirk. How do you see the nearer future, midterm future? Of course, renewables will come up a lot more. However, sometimes you don't have enough energy from renewables. You still need usually gas. This was at least the idea. Thank you.
Do you want to answer, Emilio?
Yep, sure. Thank you very much for first your observations and your question. Basically, I believe that we have two success cases in Europe, and one is Bulgaria and the second one is Poland. These two countries, they proved that the diversification is possible, and although in case of Poland this work has been launched years ago, in case of Bulgaria there was rather an emergency diversification process, which in my opinion is very successful, and you are completely right by saying that this country managed to go from full dependence on the Russian gas to the statement that they don't need any contract with Gazprom because they can feel satisfied with the alternative supplies in gas they have right now. More, Bulgaria now is playing a very significant role when it comes to the potential of diversifying both gas and electricity supplies to the neighboring countries. And I will take only one example. This is the North Macedonia, and the discussion with North Macedonia on the Bulgaria-North Macedonia interconnector is for me also an example how we can use the regulatory regime improvements in order to create the new supply possibilities for a country like like North Macedonia. And the same discussion is running when it comes to electricity. Bulgaria is offering to neighboring countries electricity to be acquired, and we look, how Bulgaria not being dependent anymore, but rather being provider of the energy security is developing right now in the region. And this is a very prominent development, and this is something I would very much comment on, and this is something which is to be followed by the countries, by the other countries. Your comments on China and Austria, Germany, it's a very valid one, but my strong preference would be to look at Austria, Germany, and other countries in the European Union, not from the region, not from the national perspective, but rather from the European perspective. So, if you look at the European Union as a whole and compare it to China, so that would be maybe the better comparison to be made than comparing Austria to China, because I would assume there are some provinces in China that are also not so much diversified as a whole China. And in Europe, we are not relying on one supplier, and what we need actually is the intra-European cooperation, and this is happening right now. So the discussion on the common gas storage approach proved to be very successful. So we have full storage right now, and we are more resilient for winter. The discussion, which has been already finished last week with the political agreement in the Council on the joint purchase of gas, is another example. And this is how by eliminating bottlenecks, both in infrastructure, but also in terms of the regulatory regime in the European Union, we can improve our resilience to the external shocks and to make us more safe on the European level. And from the energy community contracting parties, the strategic choice now is to join this club, right? To be part of this shell links, which is being offered by the European Union. That is the reason why the Ministerial Council already decided for contracting parties to follow up European Union when it comes to the gas storage regulations. So we have our own trajectory for both Serbia and Ukraine, how the gas storage should be filled up to ensure the security of gas supplies, not only for this year, but also for the next one. We are also, I have already signed, that's why I will be a little bit late, because we had the discussion with the European Commission, how to include the contracting parties of the energy community, the joint purchase mechanism for gas for this, the remaining part of the winter this year and for the future. And this is also a huge development, how Europe could provide some solidarity mechanism to the neighboring countries. So I'm quite, I would say, optimistic. And my approach is rather to look not at the individual countries, but rather on the level of the European Union. And then if you look at that, the picture is much more positive than, quite narrowed down nationalistic approach through the perspective of one specific country.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Sorry.
Yeah, just want to add, actually, I mean, this is a very good way to look at you as a nation, the single economic entity. And I think this is where we are heading, and probably that's what this crisis was fostering and triggering more intensive cooperation here, and we are becoming more of single economic entity in this respect, right? So that it hasn't been, unfortunately, really the case till recently, and that's why we had such a huge increase in energy prices, and that's why German economy started to have so big issues, because they actually turned out how much the German economy depends on Russian fuel. Some sectors really were building their comparative advantage on that. And one side comment also about dependency is actually another dependency where the EU seems to be do not very well is rare earth minerals, and there 90% of it comes from China. Talking about China, this actually not a very good ratio, I guess, and something has to be done, I think, and probably a lot of decisions or solutions have been discussed, and something will be decided. But at the moment, the EU position here is not very secure. No, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes, Teresa, please.
Thank you very much. I have a question, maybe I think it kind of concerns everybody of you. With regards to, as you see in the last few months, the protests of the last generation, so the climate process get much more intense and maybe some say even more a bit radical. And I'm wondering what's your view towards getting the point of green rebuilding in the energy sector in general, the problem with ecological issues in Europe, because we kind of see on the one hand that the society in whole gets more extreme everywhere. We had that last year as well at that conference that we were talking about. It's more black and white and less gray space. And now this also comes to this issue. How do you see, is it more hurting the cause in general, or do you see also maybe a potential in getting it faster to a more sustainable Green Deal?
Yeah. Shall I answer or shall I start? Because you said you addressed the question to all. Well, I think there is definitely potential in a way that energy transition means also that we start to use less energy. I think it's very important that, how to say, it's a side effect of the current crisis that due to the very high prices, energy consumption is more discussed. But I think it's, how to say, if there is in all this something positive, then I would consider this as something positive. Also, there is not, basically there is nothing positive in it. But I think, yes, there is a potential because the question of energy transition towards renewable forms of energy, they are, especially when it comes, for example, to hydropower, there is not only the question of the ecological concern, it's also a question of climate change and maybe less water which is available, for instance, for hydropower production. So it's quite challenging to solve all that, and I think there is really a need for cooperation. And let me say also that I think also not all, how to say, individual activities of the last generation I would really support, but basically I fully understand that I think young people have to get up and get the attraction of society because it's their future.
Thank you. Your take on the new generation protest?
Oh yeah, so maybe from my very narrow perspective of the institution I'm representing. So the countries in the Energy Committee are not the biggest polluters of the world, but they do have an understanding of the gravity of the situation. That's my impression. And that is the reason why, combined with this reflection on the future role of the fossil fuels is not sustainable one, not only from the environmental perspective, but also from the purely energy security point of view as well. They are about to decide to set up the target for CO2 reduction emission on the 15th December this year, which would result in the reduction of CO2 at the level of 60.9% for the whole energy community. 70% of that emissions to be reduced is from the energy sector, obviously. And then we are receiving, we are having a problem, because now the coal is being perceived as a pillar of the energy security in this very bumpy time, I would say. But I think there is understanding that there is a need for transition, because if you look at this obsolete energy generator infrastructure, especially in the Western Balkans, but also in Ukraine, Moldova, the choice is obvious, and I think this is something we will be following up on that. The question is, again, how we could support these countries in implementation of the transition, and I'm very much engaged now in the process of discussion with specific contracting parties on the national energy and climate plans. So the plans, there will be a document strategies which will be the blueprints for how they should achieve these targets until 2030. And this is a key document to be consulted with the social partners, with businesses, with industries, so that there is a consensus in the countries on the way how to achieve this target. But on top of that, I think it's important, and this is what we are gonna to do, is the discussion, how to establish the carbon pricing schemes in the countries. This is a big challenge right now, and I hope this discussion to be progressed very much in 2023, so that we can have at the end of next year the discussion on what kind of carbon pricing mechanism we would like to have. So all of these elements combined might give the impression that there is understanding of the need of moving forward with the energy transition in line with the objectives of the European Green Deal. But one element, one enabler is still missing. This is money. So this discussion is still open, how to finance this process in the countries of the energy community, and we are looking very intensely on some options how it could be organized. But I'm very optimistic that this part of the discussion could be also continued in the near future.
Mm-hmm. Money is the one thing. The other thing is political will. So, what is your take on that? Are the protesters heard?
Well, I wanted to add something else on that. Not whether. Well, I think this is a very good question, and also difficult because I'm just thinking about here in Austria, for instance, what kind of protesting culture do we have? And if you now consider that yesterday we had no trains going anywhere, and this is a big thing in Austria, as we have a different tradition, of course, with the strong social partnership historically, etc., etc. So we're not used to those kind of more, let's put it that way, more extreme protests, and so from this so to say cultural background, we might be very quick in seeing a risk in that for the broad consensus that seems to have established on the necessity of climate protection measures on really a large majority within society. And but if you're coming from another place, then there's of course maybe more support for those kind of things. And I think this is also a question that you always have with different kinds of more extreme protests or expressions of interests. What's better in terms of its effectiveness, like the mainstreaming of a political issue within the existing structures, or constant pressure from outside these structures? And I think there are empirically different answers from different examples, and we will have to see how this turns out. As far as I see at the moment, there's also some sort of an understanding that young people are not patient anymore, because on the other hand, this huge consensus didn't bring us as far as it should have in terms of political measures that almost everybody today agrees that are necessary. So we'll see.
Yeah, I would just give an economist's take on that. So it all comes down to motivation, and motivation now is as strong as it has ever been due to multiple factors. First, prices of carbohydrate fuels increased, which makes alternative sources of energy relatively cheaper, and it justifies investment into green energy because it's just cheaper, plenty cheaper. So companies who want to save money, have reduced their costs, they would go for it. And then, of course, strong policy nudge from the governments, because there is finally, it seems to be a more common, widespread understanding on the majority of governments in the world that the climate change issue is so crucial that there are policy measures being introduced actually to make it impossible not to do it in many countries. And there are also subsidies, there are sticks and there are also carrots introduced by government. So the EU provides special funds to countries who introduce green transition projects and digitalization projects. But I mean, this is like a source of money to also sweeten the pill and to make it realize more faster. And one more thing, that like pandemics, climate is also a global event. And although some countries can have less CO2 emissions, it's still not clear how much they implicitly produce, because this is something which can be exported to other countries. And for example, coming back to rare earth materials, very often it's extremely environmentally polluting to extract those. And several countries who are major extracting sites, they had to sacrifice the environment there. This is Chile, Congo, and some parts of China. And then also it becomes a question, actually, what is the net effect of green transition, whether the cost of polluting environment in order to produce all the materials needed for green transition are not too high. This is something which one needs to actually really think hard and make sure everything is taken into account when transitioning. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much. I will not make a final round now because we come pretty much to the end of our discussion. Thank you very much for all panelists, for your time, for your insights. It was quite a journey. Thank you, especially for you as well, for your attention. I kindly ask you to get back to the audience for just having the closing remarks, and for this I will ask Sebastian Schäffer to come back and join me maybe here for the last summing up of our conference. Yeah.
I would say a big round of applause.
Thank you very much. So how would you sum up the debates? I'm curious.
I mentioned in the beginning, but after the Danube conferences, before the Danube conference, and we, I think, have identified a couple of more topics generally for the years to come. So I think we are going to continue with this format, and we are going to continue the debate. This is the first thing that I would take away from the two panels. And I would also relate to the overall topic that the Danube Conference has. Are we going to grow together or drift apart? And maybe the answer is not yes or no. Maybe we find a little bit more of a gray area here, in the sense that like a river, we are maybe meandering, and sometimes we're growing together and sometimes we're drifting apart, but there are waves on the shore and that bring changes. And yeah, I know.
You know how I feel.
Yeah, I know, but I just use this opportunity, and you have to suffer through this. I'm sorry. Because normally Daniela corrects my two sort of picturesque language to make it understandable and concise. And I'm very grateful for that. But when we have this format and I sit in a leather chair in the foreign ministry, I need to do this. So the changes, the shores, the waves that come and go. I think that the river Danube connects, but the river Danube also divides. And we've seen in the discussion that energy can be created, but habitats can be destroyed through it. And we have a contradiction in this region that makes us very diverse, but this diversity also unites us. And this is the motto of the European Union. And therefore, I would say it has been mentioned by Ambassador Stranzl that the Danube region will be crucial for European integration in the future. And our late chairman, Erhard Busse, called the Danube the second river of European integration after the River Rhine. So I think it's a very fitting picture, and I don't want to overstretch this this picture, this analogy, this metaphor maybe even. I think we also learned that there's a lot of things that the macro-regional strategy has brought and contributed to change, but this change takes time. And we are now experiencing a extraordinary situation where we need to adapt very quickly for various reasons that we have discussed. Climate change is one of them, but also then the results of the war and the targeting of critical infrastructure. And this may be these impatience that has also been mentioned, that changes are very slow, pose a challenge that we need to bring this contradiction of patience, but also need to act fast somehow together. So in a sense that we cannot wait another winter in order to adapt to our energy needs and responsibilities that we have. But at the same time, we need to use the opportunity to not just fall back to the old terms. And I think we've seen this already coming also with now the pandemic fading out, that we return to some old habits. And I think this would be something that we need to be very careful and very paying attention to it, that we are not falling back to the old ways. But at the same time, adaptation and change needs a certain time. But we need to start at one point, because it cannot be an excuse. We may not use this as an excuse not to do something. And as it has been said by Jean Monnet, that Europe will be forged in crisis. I think we have enough crises now over the past years and decades. We don't need more crises to forge anything. The time is now. And as you said, we're all waiting for the war to end. But we already now also have to not use this as an excuse to not think about other necessities to adapt. There's an opportunity here. I think we've seen a lot of solidarity and possibility over the past decades, or even if we want to look back to the last Danube Conference, we are in a completely different environment again. But that must not be something where we take comfort in this and use it as a resting pillow to float on this river.
Thank you for the very last metaphor.
Allow me just no more metaphors, just real talk, because I know that you will also say a couple of words and a couple of thank you words, but I want to use this opportunity to say thank you, especially to you, because it's very easy as a managing director of an institute to just now say, oh, great, we've done another fantastic Danube Conference, because I think it's been a fantastic Danube Conference. But there is a person that needs to provide the framework to make it fantastic. And you've not only, again, conceptualized the whole Danube Conference, but you have also brought together all these different topics, but also the cultural aspect. And I know that it hasn't been easy to bring all of this together, especially when we are in an external situation and not at our premises, which brings additional tasks to it. And I think you've mastered it fantastic, and I think you deserve a big round of applause for everything that we have seen in this day.
Thank you.
There's the rest of the IDM team that is also responsible for making it successful, especially in this room with us. Daria, where is she? Back there. And Elisa. But also with the support for social media, Malvina. And helping us out in everything in the back here, Daniel. And the other words of thank you and the final wrap-up belongs to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sebastian. I hand thanks back to you, of course, as well. I think you also get an applause. So, and to finish my thank yous, especially since you mentioned it's not always easy to do such an event when you're on the premises of some other place. So especially I want to thanks to our hosts, the Director General Oberreiter, who is unfortunately not here today due to sickness, and also Ambassador Stranzl. He was here in the first panel. Of course, also to Dr. Eisel and his team, and here especially Oliver Pinta, Armin Clementa, who were really supporting me and us all doing this event and making this happen. Thanks a lot. So. Yeah, as the head of publications IDM, I also need to make an advertisement statement. Of course, I already did it, but please also take with you the publications that we have outside. They're all for free. You can take them home and please, distribute them in their networks. Thanks a lot. As you might already know, we already do conference proceedings in our scientific journal, Der Donauraum. The newest issue or the recent Danube Conference is also lying outside. You can take a look. But I would like to invite not just the panelists, but also every participant, since we have a lot of fields of expertise here, to participate in these proceedings, to contact us at the IDM if you're interested and submit a contribution to really document and share the expertise and the discussions. I think that's also very important. Please stay updated on future events. We have a lot of events also upcoming. We have the list for our newsletter. I think that's the best source to stay updated next to social media. And of course, please also support our work. It's very important for us to be a broad network, a broad community. So if you're interested, not yet, please become a member of the IDM. You would support our jobs and our work. Thanks a lot. And one announcement maybe as well, it was mentioned before already, we are heading towards the 70th years of IDM. On 5th of December, we're starting the anniversary year. We have a lot planned, a lot of events, a lot of expertise and publications, etc. Cross-border cooperation will be in the focus as usual. So if you're interested, please join us, celebrate with us on the different occasions, also contribute to make it more diverse and more interesting. And yeah, with this, thank you for your interest, thanks for your patience, and have a nice rest of the day.